Kate Blackwell thought she knew everything about power, until the moment fire exploded through Miller's diner and the man she'd just humiliated became the only thing standing between her and death. The CEO who'd mocked a small-town carpenter's paint-stained hands watched those same hands pull her from the flames. Sometimes salvation comes from the people we're quickest to dismiss. This is the story of one blind date, one explosion, and the moment everything changed. Stay until the end and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had started as a whisper against the windows of Miller's Diner, that old brick and chrome establishment on the corner of 5th and Main, where the coffee was always too strong and the pie was always just right. Kate Blackwell sat in the back booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl that had seen better decades, and checked her Rolex for the 4th time in 10 minutes. 7:43. Her blind date was late. She shouldn't have agreed to this. Blind dates were for desperate people, for lonely hearts who couldn't navigate the modern dating landscape, for individuals who needed their friends to intervene in their romantic lives like some kind of relationship welfare program. Kate Blackwell was none of those things. She was the CEO of Blackwell Industries, a tech empire she'd built from a college dorm room into a company worth $300 million. She had a corner office on the 37th floor with views that made grown men weep, a penthouse in the city that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, and a calendar so packed with power lunches and board meetings that she had to schedule time to breathe. But Rebecca, her college roommate and the closest thing Kate had to a best friend, had been relentless. "You're going to die alone in that glass tower of yours," Rebecca had said, over martinis at their monthly catch-up, which Kate had almost canceled twice. "When was the last time you went on an actual date? And no, investor dinners don't count." "I'm busy building an empire," Kate had replied, swirling the olive in her glass. "Romance is a luxury I can't afford right now. It's been 8 years since Marcus." The name had landed like a stone in still water. Marcus. The Harvard MBA with the perfect smile and the even more perfect betrayal, who'd stolen her prototype designs and launched a competitor company before their engagement party invitations had even been mailed. That had been the lesson Kate needed. Trust no one, depend on yourself, and never let anyone close enough to access your vulnerabilities or your intellectual property. "This guy is different," Rebecca had insisted, pulling out her phone to show Kate a picture. "His name is Ethan. He's genuine, kind, stable. He's not in tech. He's not trying to climb any corporate ladders. He's just a good man, widowed, raising a daughter. Works with his hands. My husband's cousin knows him, says he's the most decent human being in 3 counties. Kate had barely glanced at the photo, a blur of flannel and dark hair. "Works with his hands? What is he, a blacksmith?" "He's a carpenter, builds custom furniture, does renovation work. Kate, not every man is Marcus. Some people are exactly who they appear to be." And so Kate had agreed, partly to stop Rebecca's nagging, and partly because a small, carefully hidden part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, Rebecca was right. Maybe there was something to be said for simplicity, for a life less complicated than hostile takeovers and quarterly earnings reports. That optimism had lasted until approximately 7:23, when Ethan Hale had walked through the door of Miller's Diner. He was tall, she'd give him that, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that suggested manual labor rather than gym memberships. His hair was dark and slightly too long, curling at the collar of a flannel shirt that had definitely seen better days. Paint stains dotted the fabric in shades of cream and forest green. His jeans were clean but faded, and his boots, actual work boots with scuff marks and worn leather, left small traces of sawdust on the diner's checkerboard floor. But it was his hands that Kate had noticed first. Rough, calloused, with faint scars across the knuckles. The hands of someone who worked for a living, who built things and fixed things, and probably couldn't tell a stock option from a stop sign. When he'd spotted her and smiled, a genuine, slightly uncertain smile that created crow's feet at the corners of warm brown eyes, Kate had felt her stomach sink. This was Rebecca's idea of her perfect match? This small-town carpenter with paint in his hair and dirt under his fingernails? "Kate?" he'd asked, approaching the booth with an awkward, endearing uncertainty. "I'm Ethan Hale. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I was finishing up a rocking chair for Mrs. Chen down on Maple Street. and the final sanding took longer than I expected. He'd extended one of those rough hands, and Kate had shaken it briefly, noting the calluses against her own carefully manicured fingers. She'd spent $75 on this manicure 3 days ago. His hands probably hadn't seen moisturizer since the Clinton administration. "Please sit," Kate had said, her voice already cool, professional, the same tone she used with underperforming middle managers. Ethan had slid into the booth across from her, and she'd watched him take in the diner with obvious affection, the kind of look you give a place that holds memories, that means something beyond its functional purpose. "I haven't been here in months," he'd said, genuine warmth in his voice. "Mia, that's my daughter. She prefers the pizza place on 4th, but Miller's has the best coffee in town. Have you been here before?" "No," Kate had replied, not bothering to elaborate that she'd driven 45 minutes from the city, that this entire town was foreign territory to her, a place people pass through on their way to somewhere more important. "I don't usually venture out to this area." Something had flickered in Ethan's eyes. Awareness, maybe, or the first hint of understanding about exactly what kind of evening this was going to be. But his smile had held. "Well, you're in for a treat. The blueberry pie here is legendary. My late wife used to say it was the only thing in town that could compete with her mother's baking." The mention of his late wife had been meant, Kate understood, as an opening. A vulnerability offered freely, an invitation to connection. In the business world, volunteering personal information was a strategic error, something you only did with careful calculation. But Ethan had just laid it out there, honest and unguarded, like someone who didn't understand that openness was a weapon people could use against you. "That's nice," Kate had said, her tone making it clear that she didn't want to pursue this line of conversation. She'd picked up her menu, a laminated relic featuring items like the lumberjack special and Mama's meatloaf, and studied it with the intensity she usually reserved for merger proposals. The waitress had arrived then, an older woman with kind eyes and the name tag Dolores pinned to her uniform. "Well, if it isn't Ethan Hale! Haven't seen you in here in a coon's age, sweetheart. How's that beautiful little girl of yours?" "She's great, Dolores. Just turned 7 last month, growing like a weed and twice as stubborn." The affection in Ethan's voice had been impossible to miss. "7 already? Lordy, time flies. And who's this lovely lady you've brought with you?" Dolores had turned her warm smile to Kate, clearly delighted by the possibility of romance blooming in her booth. "This is Kate," Ethan had said before Kate could answer. "Kate, this is Dolores. She's been working here since before I was born, and she knows everyone's business before they do." "Guilty as charged," Dolores had laughed. "Now, what can I get you to? And don't you dare skip the pie, either of you. Fresh blueberry came out of the oven an hour ago." Ethan had ordered coffee and the pot roast dinner with a side of those famously perfect fries. Kate had ordered a garden salad, dressing on the side, and black coffee. She'd seen Dolores's smile falter slightly at the order, probably the first time someone had ordered just a salad in this place since the Reagan administration. After Dolores had left, Ethan had tried again. "So, Rebecca mentioned you run a company, technology, right? That must be exciting." "It's demanding," Kate had replied, pulling out her phone to check her emails. 3 had come in during the last 5 minutes. "I don't really have time for exciting. I have time for effective." "What does your company do exactly?" Kate had looked up from her phone, considering how to explain enterprise software solutions and cloud-based infrastructure to someone who probably thought the cloud was just where rain came from. "We develop integrated software platforms for corporate clients, streamlining operations, optimizing workflows, that sort of thing." "So you help companies work better," Ethan had said, nodding. "That's great. I bet you're really good at it." The simplification had irritated her, though she couldn't quite explain why. "It's a bit more complex than that, but sure. I'm sure it is. I didn't mean to oversimplify." He'd leaned back in the booth, and Kate had noticed for the first time how he seemed comfortable in his own skin, unhurried in a way that felt almost alien to her. "I'm good with wood, not computers. Give me a piece of maple and a set of chisels, and I can build you anything from a dining table to a hope chest. But ask me to use anything more complicated than email, and I'm lost." "How quaint," Kate had said, and she'd seen him flinch slightly at the word. Their food had arrived, and Kate had picked at her salad while Ethan had eaten his pot roast with obvious enjoyment, occasionally commenting on the food or asking questions that Kate had answered with increasing brevity. He'd asked about her hobbies. She didn't have any. Her favorite books? She didn't read for pleasure. Her family? She had none, just distant cousins she hadn't spoken to in years. "What about you?" she'd finally asked, more out of obligation than interest. "What do you do when you're not building things?" "Mostly I spend time with Mia," he'd said, and his whole face had changed when he talked about his daughter, softened, lit from within. "We go hiking, do art projects, read together. She's obsessed with dinosaurs right now, so we've been to the Natural History Museum about 6 times this summer. I'm building her a treehouse in the backyard. She's helping, learning to use tools, measure things. Last weekend we spent 3 hours picking out exactly the right shade of purple paint for the walls." "Sounds time-consuming," Kate had commented. "It's time well spent," Ethan had replied, and there had been a slight edge to his voice now, the first hint of something other than patient friendliness. "She's 7 years old. She lost her mother when she was 3. Time with her isn't something I consider a cost. It's the whole point." Kate had felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Shame, maybe, or the recognition that she'd just said something casually cruel to a man who'd experienced real loss, but instead of apologizing, she'd pivoted. "How did she, if you don't mind me asking?" "Car accident," Ethan had said quietly. "Drunk driver crossed the median on Highway 22. Sarah died at the scene. Mia was with a babysitter, thank God. That was 4 years ago." "I'm sorry," Kate had said, and she'd meant it. Whatever else she wasn't heartless. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. It still is some days. But you keep going, because you have to, and because there's someone depending on you, and because that's what Sarah would have wanted." He'd paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "Rebecca mentioned you went through something difficult too. An engagement that ended badly?" Kate had stiffened. Rebecca had no right to share that information, no right to hand her pain to a stranger like it was dinner conversation. "That was a long time ago. I'm over it." "Are you?" Ethan had asked gently, and Kate had bristled at the implied intimacy, the suggestion that this carpenter could read her after one difficult dinner. "Yes. I learned a valuable lesson. Trust yourself, build your own empire, and don't depend on anyone else for your happiness or your success. It served me well." "Sounds lonely," Ethan had observed, and Kate had felt her temper flare. "Sounds successful," she'd corrected sharply. "Not everyone needs to fill their lives with other people to feel fulfilled. Some of us are perfectly content with our careers, our achievements, our independence. Content isn't the same as happy. And happiness isn't the same as settling for a simple life in a small town, building furniture for people who probably can't even afford to pay you what you're worth." The words had come out harsher than Kate intended, and she'd seen Ethan's expression close off, the warmth draining from his eyes. The comfortable man who'd walked in at 7:23 had been replaced by someone warier, more reserved. "You're right," he'd said quietly. "I'm sure my life seems very small to someone like you. Excuse me a moment." He'd stood and walked toward the restrooms, and Kate had been left alone in the booth, feeling simultaneously justified and inexplicably guilty. She'd checked her phone again. 7 emails now, including one from her CFO about the investor meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. That was reality. That was what mattered. Not this awkward dinner with a man who lived in a completely different world, who measured success in completed rocking chairs and quality time with a 7-year-old. She'd been composing a polite exit strategy in her head when the explosion happened. It started as a sound, a deep, ominous whoosh, like the world taking a breath before screaming. Then came the blast. A concussive wave of force that shook the entire diner, sent dishes crashing from tables, and blew out the pass-through window between the dining room and the kitchen. Flames erupted through the opening, angry tongues of orange and red that licked at the ceiling tiles and sent black smoke billowing into the dining area. People started screaming. Chairs toppled as customers scrambled for the door. Dolores dropped a tray, her face white with shock. The smoke alarm added its shrill voice to the chaos, and Kate found herself frozen in the booth, her mind trying to process what had just happened while her body refused to cooperate. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw Ethan emerge from the hallway near the restrooms. For a split second, their eyes met across the chaos, and Kate saw something in his expression that she'd never seen before. Absolute clarity of purpose, zero hesitation. While everyone else was running toward the door, Ethan was running toward the fire. "Everyone out, now!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the panic with command born of experience. "Dolores, help the people in the front booths. Is anyone in the kitchen?" The cook, Jimmy, he was right there when Dolores's voice broke. Ethan didn't wait for more. He grabbed a tablecloth, dunked it in someone's water pitcher, and wrapped it around his face. Then he ran straight through the flames into the kitchen. Kate found herself moving then, propelled by something she couldn't name: fear, instinct, the surreal nature of watching someone run toward danger while everyone else ran away. She made it to the door with the crush of other customers, but instead of going through, she stopped, pressed against the wall, watching. The diner was emptying fast. Customers poured into the street, coughing and crying. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail, fire trucks, ambulances, police. The response time in this small town was apparently better than in the city, where you could wait 15 minutes just for someone to answer your 911 call. Through the smoke, Kate could see shapes moving in the kitchen. Ethan appeared, half carrying a man in a cook's uniform, Jimmy, presumably, who was coughing violently and clutching his arm. Ethan guided him toward the door, shouting, "Get out! Everyone out!" But he didn't follow his own command. As soon as Jimmy was clear, Ethan turned back to the inferno. Kate watched in disbelief as he moved through the kitchen with purpose, seemingly oblivious to the flames and smoke. What was he doing? What could possibly be worth going back in there for? "Is everyone out?" A firefighter appeared beside Kate, pulling her toward the door. "Ma'am, you need to evacuate now." "There's someone still in there," Kate said, surprised by how rough her voice sounded. "The man who just brought the cook out. He went back in." The firefighter swore and spoke into his radio, but Ethan was already emerging again, this time supporting an elderly man Kate recognized from the counter, someone who must have been in the restroom during the initial panic. Ethan's flannel shirt was singed, his face was streaked with soot, and his eyes were red from smoke exposure, but his movements were controlled, efficient. "Propane line," he shouted to the firefighters who were now rushing in. "Main shutoff is on the back wall, left side. I couldn't reach it. Too much heat." The firefighters went to work with practiced precision, but Ethan wasn't done. "Dolores!" he called out, scanning the crowd that had gathered in the street. "Dolores, are you out?" "I'm here, sweetheart." The waitress emerged from the crowd, her uniform covered in coffee stains and her eyes streaming tears. From smoke or emotion, Kate couldn't tell. "How many staff were working tonight?" Ethan demanded. "Just me and Jimmy in front, Carlos and Miguel in the kitchen, and Tom was washing dishes." "Carlos!" A man Kate hadn't noticed before raised his hand, one of the cooks, presumably. "Miguel and Tom." "Here!" Two more voices from the crowd. Ethan visibly sagged with relief, bending forward to brace his hands on his knees as he coughed violently. A paramedic rushed over with an oxygen mask, but he waved it away. "The customers, did everyone get out?" "Counting now," a police officer reported, moving through the crowd. Kate found herself walking toward Ethan, her legs unsteady, her mind still struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. The man she'd spent the last 40 minutes insulting, whose life she'd dismissed as small and simple, had just run into a burning building, multiple times. While she'd frozen, while everyone else had run, he'd charged into fire to save strangers. "Are you okay?" The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Ethan looked up, and for a moment Kate saw the toll the last few minutes had taken. The pain in his smoke-reddened eyes, the trembling in those rough, capable hands. But then he straightened, and his expression became neutral, polite. The same expression you'd give a stranger. "I'm fine. Are you hurt?" "No, I got out early. You..." Kate struggled to find words. "You saved people. You went back in." "Someone had to," Ethan said simply. He accepted the oxygen mask from the paramedic this time, taking a few deep breaths before continuing. The propane line was leaking. If it had reached full ignition, the whole building could have gone up, maybe damaged the structures on either side. "We were lucky the explosion was relatively contained." "How did you know what to do?" Kate asked. How did you know about the propane line? I was a firefighter, Ethan interrupted, his voice flat. Before I became a carpenter. I spent 8 years with Engine Company 12 in Portland. Responded to hundreds of calls, probably a dozen serious explosions. You don't forget that training. Kate felt something cold settle in her stomach. Rebecca didn't mention that. Rebecca doesn't know. I don't advertise it. I left the department after Sarah died. Couldn't maintain that job in single parenthood. Too many late shifts, too many dangerous calls, too much risk that Mia could lose both parents. He handed the oxygen mask back to the paramedic. I need to call my daughter. She's with my neighbor tonight, but she'll hear about this, and I need to let her know I'm okay before she panics. He walked away without waiting for a response, pulling out a phone that had somehow survived the chaos. Kate watched him go, watched him lean against a parked car as he made the call, watched the transformation in his body language as he clearly spoke to his daughter, all the tension draining away, replaced by gentleness. That man's a damn hero. Dolores appeared at Kate's elbow, wrapped in a blanket someone had provided. Saved Jimmy's life, no question. Jimmy was right next to the stove when the line blew. Would have been a lot worse if Ethan hadn't grabbed him so fast. He said he used to be a firefighter, Kate said, still watching Ethan. Damn good one too, from what I heard. Left to take care of his little girl after the accident. Now he builds furniture and fixes up houses and volunteers with the youth center. Dolores shook her head. Some men talk about being good. Ethan Hale just is. That little girl of his is lucky to have a daddy like that. Kate didn't respond. She was too busy recalculating everything she'd thought she knew about the man she'd dismissed so casually over dinner. The paint-stained flannel wasn't a lack of sophistication, it was evidence of honest work. The rough hands weren't a mark of limitation, they were proof of capability. The simple life she'd sneered at wasn't settling, it was choosing what mattered, and she'd spent an hour making him feel small. The fire was under control now, the flames reduced to smoldering ash and the occasional flare-up that firefighters quickly extinguished. The diner was destroyed. That was clear even from the street. The kitchen was a total loss, and significant smoke and water damage extended into the dining area. Miller's Diner, that institution of strong coffee and perfect pie, was gone. Ethan finished his phone call and returned to where the paramedics had set up a triage area. He submitted to a more thorough examination this time, letting them check his vitals and apply burn cream to a few blisters on his forearms that Kate hadn't noticed before. She watched from a distance, uncertain whether she had any right to approach him again, whether her presence would be welcome or just another reminder of her earlier cruelty. The decision was made for her when a police officer began coordinating with the crowd. Folks, we're going to need statements from everyone who was in the diner when the explosion occurred. If you can stick around for a few minutes, we have officers ready to take your information. The next hour passed in a blur of questions and answers. Kate explained where she'd been sitting, what she'd heard and seen, the chaos of the evacuation. When asked about Ethan's actions, she found herself speaking with a passion that surprised her, making sure they understood that without him, people would have died. The officer taking her statement had nodded knowingly. Ethan Hale, should have known. He's got a reputation around here. For running into burning buildings? Kate had asked. For showing up when people need help. Fixed my mom's roof last winter, wouldn't take a dime for it. Organized the whole town to build a wheelchair ramp for old Joe Peterson. Teaches carpentry to at-risk youth every Saturday. Guy's basically a saint with a toolbox. The comment had stung in ways Kate couldn't fully articulate. By the time statements were taken and people were cleared to leave, it was nearly 10 o'clock. The crowd had thinned, most people heading home to process the shock of what had happened. Kate found herself standing in the parking lot, staring at her Mercedes and trying to remember why she'd come here in the first place. A blind date. She'd driven 45 minutes for a blind date with a man she'd judged and dismissed and whose life he'd saved despite her contempt. Kate, Ethan's voice behind her quieter now, hoarse from smoke inhalation. Are you okay to drive? The paramedics said some people might experience delayed shock. She turned to face him. He looked exhausted, his face still streaked with soot despite obvious attempts to clean up, his flannel shirt ruined, burns peeking out from under the bandages on his forearms. And still, his first concern was whether she was okay. I'm fine, Kate said automatically. Then, because those words were inadequate, thank you for what you did. You saved lives tonight. Just training kicking in, Ethan replied, but Kate shook her head. No, training gets you through the door. Courage keeps you going back. You could have left with everyone else, but you didn't. That's not training, that's character. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. I appreciate that. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything Kate wanted to say and didn't know how. Finally, she forced herself to speak the truth she owed him. I was horrible to you tonight, before the fire, during dinner. I judged you, dismissed you, made you feel inadequate because my own insecurities made me need to feel superior. There's no excuse for that. I'm sorry. Ethan studied her for a long moment, and Kate made herself hold his gaze, made herself not look away from whatever judgment she saw there. Finally, he nodded slowly. Apology accepted. For what it's worth, you weren't entirely wrong. My life is simple compared to yours. I do live in a small town, work with my hands, spend my evenings reading dinosaur books with a 7-year-old. By a lot of standards, especially the ones you're used to, that probably does seem small. It's not, Kate said quickly. Tonight proved it's not. You have skills I can't even imagine, courage I don't possess, and a life built around things that actually matter. My empire is software and stock options and quarterly earnings. Yours is knowing how to save lives and building tree houses and showing up for your community. One of those is worth a hell of a lot more than the other. I don't think it's a competition, Ethan said gently. Different people build different lives. Yours is valuable in its own way. But is it? Kate heard herself ask, the question emerging from somewhere deeper than she'd meant to access. Is it really valuable, or is it just expensive? Is it meaningful, or just busy? Tonight, when that explosion happened, I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't help. I've spent 15 years building a company, accumulating success, proving I don't need anyone. And in the moment when it mattered, when people needed help, I was useless. You weren't useless. You evacuated. You didn't panic. You made sure everyone was accounted for. While you ran into fire, Kate countered, multiple times. For strangers, one of whom had spent the last hour treating you like you weren't worth her time. Ethan's expression softened slightly. I didn't run in there for you, Kate. I ran in because there were people who needed help, and I had the ability to provide it. That's all. No judgment, no keeping score, no conditions on who deserves to be saved based on how they treat me at dinner. The words, kind as they were clearly meant to be, landed like a blow. They highlighted the difference between them more clearly than any of Kate's earlier insults had. He acted based on principle, on innate decency, while she calculated angles and protected herself and kept careful tallies of who owed what to whom. I should let you go, Kate said, suddenly desperate to leave, to get in her car and drive away from this small town and this man who was making her question everything about the life she'd built. I'm sure your daughter is worried, despite your call, and I have a meeting in the morning that I need to prepare for. At 10 o'clock at night? After what just happened? Investor pitch, $30 million on the line. The prep work doesn't stop because of a kitchen fire. That wasn't a kitchen fire. That was a gas explosion that could have killed everyone in that building. Ethan's voice was sharp now, frustrated. You almost died tonight, Kate. Doesn't that warrant at least a moment of processing? Processing doesn't prepare presentations or secure funding, Kate replied, her defenses snapping back into place with practiced ease. I've built my company by staying focused, by not letting emotion or circumstance derail my objectives. And how's that working out for you? Ethan asked quietly. All that focus, all that control, does it make you happy? Kate felt anger flash through her, not at him, but at the question itself, at the way it seemed to see through every carefully constructed wall she'd built. Happiness is overrated. Success is measurable. So is loneliness, Ethan observed. Then he sighed, running a hand through his soot-darkened hair. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. You don't owe me explanations about your life choices, and I shouldn't be pushing. Tonight's been intense, and I think we're both probably not at our best. He was giving her an out, Kate realized, offering a graceful exit from a conversation that was cutting too close to truths she didn't want to examine. The smart thing, the strategic thing, would be to take it. Instead, she heard herself say, You're right, though. I am lonely. I just don't usually admit it, even to myself. Ethan's expression shifted. Surprise, then something gentler. Kate, I should go, she interrupted, unable to handle whatever kindness he was about to offer. Thank you again for everything, and I'm sorry for all of it. She turned toward her car, keys already in her hand, escape just a few steps away. But before she could reach the door, Ethan spoke again. Kate, wait. Your left rear tire is flat. She stopped, turned, and stared at her Mercedes. Sure enough, the rear driver's side tire was completely deflated, the rim nearly touching the pavement. You've got to be kidding me. Probably picked up debris during the evacuation. There's glass and metal all over the street. Ethan walked over to inspect the damage. Do you have a spare? Yes, I think. Kate opened the trunk, which revealed a spare tire and a jack she'd never used and had no idea how to operate. I usually just call roadside assistance, which is going to take hours tonight, given everything that's happened. Half the emergency services in the county are still here dealing with the fire investigation. Ethan studied the darkening sky. And there's a storm coming, big one according to the forecast. You don't want to be stuck here when that hits. I'll call a tow truck, get the car taken somewhere, arrange a rental. At 10 o'clock at night in a town this size, Kate, there's one garage and Frank closes at 6. He won't be back until 7 tomorrow morning. Then I'll get a hotel. Miller's Diner is the only thing on this block. The nearest hotel is 40 minutes north in the direction of that storm. Ethan paused, clearly wrestling with something. Then he sighed. Look, I know this is awkward given how this evening has gone, but I'm heading back toward Portland in the morning. I have a lumber delivery to pick up. I could give you a ride, get you back to the city before your investor meeting. We'd need to leave around 5 a.m. to get you there in time, but it's an option. Kate's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of owing him anything, of being dependent on his kindness after how she'd treated him, was intolerable. But as she looked at her destroyed tire, at the darkening sky where lightning now flickered in the distance, at the ruined diner and the empty street, she recognized the reality of her situation. Pride was expensive, and she couldn't afford it right now. Are you sure? She asked. After tonight, after how I acted, you don't owe me anything. In fact, I'd understand if you wanted nothing to do with me. I don't operate on a system of owing, Ethan said simply. You need help. I can provide it. That's enough. Kate felt something crack in her chest, some carefully maintained barrier between her and genuine human connection. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. I accept. There's a decent motel about 10 minutes from here, opposite direction from the storm. I'll follow you there. Make sure you get checked in okay. Give me your number and I'll text you when I'm heading your way in the morning. They exchanged numbers, an exchange that felt oddly intimate given the evening's chaos, and Ethan waited while Kate called the motel to reserve a room. Then he followed her aging pickup truck trailing her Mercedes as she carefully navigated away from the disaster scene, her flat tire thumping with every rotation. The motel was exactly what she'd expected. A single-story structure with doors that opened directly to the parking lot, a flickering neon sign advertising color TV and air conditioning like they were luxury amenities, and a clerk who looked barely old enough to be working the night shift. Kate checked in, accepted a key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag, and returned to where Ethan was waiting by his truck. You gonna be okay? He asked. I've stayed in worse places, Kate lied. She hadn't, not in at least a decade, but she wasn't about to admit that. I'll be here at 5. That'll get us into Portland by 8, maybe 8:30 depending on traffic. That enough time before your meeting? It's at 10. That's perfect. Okay. Ethan moved to get in his truck, then paused. Kate? For what it's worth, I don't think you're useless. I think you're scared, and you've built a lot of armor to protect yourself, and sometimes that armor makes you say things that hurt people. But underneath that, I think there's someone who's capable of a lot more kindness than she allows herself to show. Before Kate could respond, before she could even process what he'd said, Ethan was in his truck, engine starting, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. She watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing around the corner, and felt more alone than she had in years. The motel room was exactly as depressing as she'd anticipated. Thin carpet, thinner walls, a bed that sagged in the middle, and a bathroom where the grout had given up years ago. Kate sat on the edge of the bed, still in her dinner clothes, a silk blouse and designer slacks that now smelled of smoke, and opened her laptop to work on the investor presentation. But the words on the screen wouldn't come into focus. Every time she tried to concentrate on market projections and competitive advantages, she saw flames. Smoke. Ethan's face as he ran toward danger. The rough, capable hands that had pulled people to safety, the same hands she'd looked at with disdain over dinner. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "How did it go? Tell me everything." Kate stared at the message for a long moment. "How did you summarize an evening where you'd been terrible and humbled and saved and offered grace you didn't deserve? Where you'd watched someone risk their life for strangers and realized your own life, for all its success, was built on foundations as shallow as they were expensive?" "Complicated," she typed back. "I'll call you tomorrow." She set the phone down and returned to her presentation, forcing herself to focus. $30 million, 300 employees, a company valuation that made her one of the youngest female CEOs in her sector. That was what mattered. That was real. But as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain began to patter against the motel window, Kate found herself thinking about a 7-year-old girl who loved dinosaurs and purple paint, and a father who'd given up a career saving lives to be there when she built Lego towers. She thought about a man who ran toward fire without hesitation, who showed up for his community without expectation of reward, who offered kindness to someone who'd treated him with contempt. And for the first time in 8 years, Kate Blackwell wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd been measuring success with the wrong tools all along. Kate didn't sleep. She'd tried, lying on that sagging mattress while rain hammered against the window and thunder rolled across the sky like bowling balls in heaven's attic. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire. So instead she worked, refining her presentation until the slides were perfect, until every word was precisely calibrated to inspire confidence and open wallets. By 4:30 in the morning, she'd showered in the motel's anemic water pressure, dressed in the spare outfit she always kept in her car for emergencies, and was sitting in the parking lot nursing terrible coffee from the lobby's ancient machine when Ethan's pickup truck pulled in. He looked more rested than she felt, despite everything. He'd changed into clean jeans and a dark blue Henley that somehow made his eyes even warmer, and his hair was still damp from a shower. When he climbed out of the truck, Kate noticed he moved with a slight stiffness that suggested those burns and bruises from last night were making themselves known this morning. "Morning," he said, his voice still carrying a rasp from the smoke. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." Kate grabbed her briefcase and laptop bag from the Mercedes, pausing to look at the flat tire one more time. "I'll arrange to have this towed once I'm back in the city. Frank will take care of it. I'll give him a call. Let him know where to find it. He's honest. Won't overcharge you." Ethan held open the passenger door of his truck, and Kate climbed in, immediately noticing how different this vehicle was from her luxury sedan. The seats were cloth instead of leather, worn but clean. The cab smelled like sawdust and coffee, with hints of something sweeter, maybe the purple paint Ethan had mentioned his daughter picking out. A child's car seat was buckled in the back, and a small stuffed triceratops sat in the cup holder. "Sorry about the mess," Ethan said, following her gaze as he settled into the driver's seat. "Mia leaves evidence of her existence everywhere she goes." "It's not messy," Kate said, and she meant it. It was lived in, loved in. Real in a way her pristine penthouse with its minimalist decor and cleaning service had never been. They pulled out of the motel parking lot as the sky was just beginning to lighten, that deep purple gray that came before dawn. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and the road gleamed wet in the headlights. For the first few minutes, they drove in silence, and Kate found herself studying Ethan's profile when she thought he wasn't looking. The strong line of his jaw, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned, the capable hands on the steering wheel that had pulled people from fire just hours ago. "How are you feeling?" she asked finally, because the silence was becoming awkward and because she genuinely wanted to know. "Those burns looked painful." "I've had worse," Ethan replied. "These are mostly first-degree, couple of second-degree spots. They'll heal clean. The smoke inhalation is more annoying. Feels like I swallowed sandpaper." "You should probably see a doctor." "I will. I have a checkup scheduled with my GP next week anyway. I'll have her take a look. He glanced over at her. What about you? Did you sleep at all? Not really. Too much adrenaline, I think. And I needed to finish my presentation. The $30 million pitch. Yes. Kate pulled out her phone, checking emails even though nothing important would have come through at 4:30 in the morning. It was habit, the same way some people bit their nails or tapped their feet. It's a crucial meeting. If we secure this funding round, we can expand into 3 new markets, double our development team, and potentially go public within 18 months. That sounds like a lot of growth very fast, Ethan observed. Is that what you want? To go public? It's the logical next step. Scale up, increase valuation, provide returns for our current investors. That's how you build a successful company. And after you go public? What's the next goal? Kate opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. It was a question she'd been asked dozens of times by reporters, investors, and board members, and she always had a ready response about market expansion and industry leadership in creating shareholder value. But sitting in this pickup truck that smelled like sawdust and purple paint, with a man who'd traded a career saving lives for bedtime stories with a 7-year-old, those rehearsed answers felt hollow. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I haven't really thought that far ahead. There's always another goal, another milestone. I guess I just keep moving forward. Toward what, though? Ethan asked, not unkindly. I'm not trying to be difficult, Kate. I'm genuinely curious. You've built something impressive, clearly. But is it taking you somewhere you actually want to go, or are you just moving because stopping feels like failure? The question hit uncomfortably close to truths Kate had spent years avoiding. Why did you really leave the fire department? She countered, deflecting. Was it just about Mia, or was there more to it? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Kate thought maybe she'd overstepped, pushed too hard into territory that wasn't hers to explore. But then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. Both, I guess. After Sarah died, I couldn't do the job the same way. Every call where there was a fatality, every accident scene, every time I had to tell someone their loved one didn't make it, it brought everything back. And I kept thinking about Mia, about how she'd already lost her mother, about what it would do to her if something happened to me. So yeah, I left for her. But also for me, because I needed to build something instead of just responding to things falling apart. And carpentry does that for you? Building furniture? It's not just furniture, Ethan said, and there was passion in his voice now, the same intensity Kate heard in her own when she talked about her company. When someone commissions a dining table from me, I'm building the place where their family will gather for holidays, where their kids will do homework, where they'll have difficult conversations and celebrations and ordinary Tuesday dinners. When I restore an old house, I'm preserving someone's history, giving them back something they thought was lost. It matters. Maybe not in ways that show up on a balance sheet, but it matters. Kate found herself thinking about her own condo, about the expensive furniture she'd purchased from a catalog without ever meeting the craftsman who'd made it, about how she ate most of her meals standing at the kitchen counter while reviewing reports on her tablet. When was the last time she'd actually gathered with people around a table, had a conversation that wasn't about work or networking or strategic advantage? I think that's beautiful, she said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. I think what you do, what you've built, it's more valuable than what I do. You create spaces for connection. I create efficiencies. Don't sell yourself short, Ethan replied. Your software probably helps thousands of companies work better, employ more people, serve their customers more effectively. That's not nothing. That's impact too, just in a different form. But does it matter to me? The question escaped before Kate could stop it, raw and honest in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Or is it just what I do because I'm good at it, because it proves I don't need anyone, because it's the opposite of depending on someone who can betray you? Ethan didn't answer immediately. They'd reached the highway now, and he merged smoothly into the sparse pre-dawn traffic. The rain was picking up again, and he adjusted the windshield wipers to a faster rhythm. I think, he said carefully, that we all build our lives around our wounds. Mine is loss. Sarah dying, suddenly and senselessly. So I build things that feel permanent, that I can control, that won't disappear in an instant. Yours is betrayal, from what you mentioned last night. So you build walls, maintain control, make sure you're never vulnerable to someone else's choices. Neither approach is wrong, Kate, but maybe both are incomplete. What's the complete version? Kate asked. Kate bet. I'm still figuring that out myself, Ethan admitted. But I think it involves being brave enough to need people again, even when you know they might leave. Building something that matters, even when you can't control all the outcomes. Showing up for life, even when it scares you. They drove in silence for a while after that, and Kate watched the landscape transition from small town to countryside to the beginnings of suburban sprawl. The rain intensified, drumming against the truck's roof with increasing violence, and the sky remained stubbornly dark despite the approaching dawn. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and thunder followed seconds later. Storm's getting worse, Ethan noted, frowning at the sky. Weather reports said it would pass to the south, but this looks like it's heading right for us. Will it slow us down? Kate checked the time on her phone. 5:45. They still had over 4 hours before her meeting, and Portland was maybe 90 minutes away under normal conditions. Might. Depends on how bad it gets. Even as he spoke, the rain intensified further, becoming a deluge that reduced visibility to almost nothing. Ethan slowed the truck, flipping the wipers to their highest setting. This is heavier than I expected. Weather radar must have been wrong about the path. The highway ahead was nearly empty. Most people had the good sense not to drive through a storm like this. Kate could barely see the taillights of the few vehicles ahead of them, vague red smudges in the gray curtain of rain. Wind buffeted the truck, and she found herself gripping the door handle as they swayed slightly. Maybe we should pull over, she suggested, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. Wait it out. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a rest stop about 5 miles ahead. We can... The impact came without warning. Something massive and dark flew across the road ahead of them, and Ethan slammed on the brakes, the truck hydroplaning slightly before the tires caught traction. Through the rain, Kate could barely make out what had happened. A tree, massive and old, had fallen directly across the highway. Not just fallen, but shattered, split by lightning and scattered across both lanes like a giant's game of pickup sticks. Jesus, Ethan breathed, bringing the truck to a complete stop about 30 feet from the debris. That was close. Another few seconds and we'd have been right under it. Kate's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The tree completely blocked the road. There was no way forward, not without a crew and chainsaws and heavy equipment. What do we do? Back up, find a place to turn around, take the old mountain road. It parallels the highway for about 20 miles before reconnecting. It'll add maybe 40 minutes to the drive, but it's the only option. Ethan was already shifting into reverse, carefully backing away from the fallen tree. He found a spot wide enough to execute a careful 3-point turn, and they headed back the way they'd come, taking an exit Kate had barely noticed on the way past. The mountain road was exactly what it sounded like, narrow, winding, carved into the hillside with steep drops on one side and rock face on the other. Under normal conditions, it was probably scenic. In a storm like this, with rain obscuring the edges and wind threatening to push them toward the guardrail, it was terrifying. I'm sorry about this, Ethan said, his attention fixed on the road. I should have checked the weather more carefully before offering to drive you. You couldn't have known, Kate replied, and I'm the one who needed the ride. If anything, I should be apologizing for putting you in this situation. Nobody's at fault. Sometimes storms just happen. He navigated a particularly sharp curve with steady hands. Though I have to admit, this is turning into quite the memorable blind date. Fire, explosions, midnight confessions, and now a mountain storm. Rebecca really knows how to set up an evening. Despite everything, Kate found herself laughing, a short, slightly hysterical sound that surprised them both. When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. I'm pretty sure this violates several chapters of the normal dating handbook. I don't think we're exactly handbook people, Ethan observed with a slight smile. You run a tech empire and work through the night. I build furniture and read dinosaur books. We're both probably too weird for the normal rules anyway. Weird, Kate repeated, testing the word. I don't think anyone's ever called me weird before. Driven, yes. Intimidating, frequently. Cold, more times than I care to count. But not weird. Well, you are. In a good way, I think. You're smart enough to build something from nothing, tough enough to survive betrayal and keep moving forward, and honest enough to apologize when you're wrong. That's pretty weird by most standards. Most people can't manage one of those things, let alone all three. Kate felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something she couldn't quite name but that felt dangerously like hope. Before she could respond, the truck lurched violently to the right, and Ethan swore under his breath as he fought to maintain control. What was that? Kate's hands were braced against the dashboard. Felt like the tire caught something. Ethan eased the truck to a stop at a slightly wider section of the road, where a rocky outcropping provided some shelter from the worst of the wind. He put the vehicle in park and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel. I need to check it out. Stay here. In this storm? Ethan, you'll get soaked. Already am, he said with a grim smile, and Kate realized he was right. Water was seeping in through the door seals, and his shirt was already damp at the shoulders. I'll be quick. He climbed out into the deluge, and Kate watched through the rain-distorted windshield as he examined the truck. Even through the blur, she could see his body language change, shoulders tensing, head dropping in what looked like frustration or resignation. When he climbed back into the cab, he was drenched, water streaming from his hair and clothes, and his expression was grim. Bad news? Kate asked, though his face had already told her the answer. Fuel line damage. Must have caught some debris from that fallen tree earlier, or maybe from the road conditions. It's leaking pretty badly. He ran a wet hand through his wet hair. I can patch it temporarily, but we're stuck here until the storm lets up enough for me to work safely. And even then, we're going to have to drive very carefully, avoid any kind of speed that would stress the repair. Kate checked her phone. 6:23. How long do you think the storm will last? Weather radar's not loading. Signal's too weak up here. But storms like this usually blow through in a few hours. We might be stuck until 8 or 9. That's cutting it close for my meeting. Really close. Kate pulled up her calendar, her mind already calculating alternatives. I could call them, try to push it back to afternoon. Can you afford to do that? You said this was crucial. The alternative is showing up late or not at all. Neither of those options inspires investor confidence. Kate was already composing an email to her CFO, explaining the situation when the phone in her hand went dark. Not just dimmed, completely black. She pressed the power button. Nothing. No. Battery die? It was at 60% 10 minutes ago. Kate held down the power button, tried the side buttons, performed every restart sequence she knew. The phone remained dead, an expensive paperweight. This is not happening. This cannot be happening. Let me try mine. Ethan pulled his own phone from his pocket, but when he pressed the power button, the result was the same. Nothing. That's weird. Mine was fully charged this morning. How is that possible? 2 phones, different models, both suddenly dead? Ethan's expression shifted, became more serious. The lightning strike. The tree. If we were close enough when it hit, the electromagnetic pulse could have fried any electronics in the vicinity. It's not common, but it happens. Kate stared at her dead phone, at the black screen that held her entire life. Contacts, calendar, emails, presentations, everything. Without it, she couldn't call her office, couldn't reach the investors, couldn't even check the time. So we're stuck on a mountain in a storm with no communication and a damaged truck. Is that what you're telling me? Pretty much, yeah. Ethan set his own dead phone in the cup holder next to the stuffed Triceratops. But we're not in danger. The truck is sheltered. We have gas for heat if we need it, though we need to conserve fuel given the leak. And once the storm passes, I can patch the line and we can make our way down to somewhere with working phones. By which time I'll have missed the most important meeting of my company's fiscal year. Kate heard her voice rising, felt panic clawing at her throat, and forced herself to take a breath. This wasn't Ethan's fault. None of this was his fault. He'd offered her help, and instead of a simple drive, they'd ended up in the middle of a nightmare. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. This is my company, my people. They're depending on this funding to keep their jobs, to keep building something that matters. And I'm going to let them down because I'm stuck on a mountain. You're not letting them down, Ethan said quietly. You're caught in circumstances beyond your control. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like failure either way. Kate pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push back the tears that threatened. She didn't cry. Hadn't cried since Marcus, since she'd decided that tears were a luxury successful people couldn't afford. 300 employees, they all have families, mortgages, lives that depend on the decisions I make. And I'm about to lose $30 million because I got a flat tire and accepted a ride and a storm knocked down a tree. Kate. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. She lowered her hands, met his eyes. You can't control weather, he said. You can't control fallen trees or lightning strikes or fuel line leaks. What you can control is how you respond. When we get off this mountain, and we will, you'll figure it out. Maybe you reschedule the meeting. Maybe you have your CFO take it. Maybe you lose this funding round and find another one. But right now, in this moment, the only thing you need to do is stay calm and stay safe. Everything else is future Kate's problem. Future Kate sounds like she's going to have a terrible day, Kate said, but she felt the panic receding slightly, pushed back by Ethan's steady presence. Present Kate is trapped on a mountain with a carpenter in a storm. She's not having a great day either, but she's handling it. Ethan shifted in his seat, grimacing slightly. Listen, I know this isn't ideal, but we need to make some decisions. The truck's going to get cold fast without the engine running, and we need to conserve what fuel we have. I've got an emergency kit in the back, blankets, water, some snacks. We can make a temporary shelter using the truck bed and the tarp I keep for lumber deliveries. It's not comfortable, but it'll keep us dry and relatively warm. You want us to sit in the back of your truck in a tarp shelter during a mountain storm? Kate heard the incredulity in her own voice. Unless you have a better idea, yes. We could stay in the cab, but we can't run the heat continuously, and it's going to get pretty miserable in here pretty fast. At least in the truck bed with the tarp rigged properly, we'll have a space we can keep reasonably dry and insulated with the emergency blankets. Kate looked out at the storm, at the rain that showed no signs of lessening, at the rocky mountain road that was their only path off this ridge. Then she looked at Ethan, at this man who'd saved her life last night and was now calmly proposing to build a shelter in a truck bed like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Okay, she said, because what else was there to say? Show me what to do. The next 20 minutes were a crash course in survival pragmatism. Ethan worked with efficient purpose, his firefighter training evident in how he assessed the situation and executed solutions. He showed Kate how to help him rig the tarp between the truck bed walls and the raised tailgate, creating a space that was maybe 6 feet by 4 feet, cramped but protected from the worst of the rain. He laid down foam pads from his emergency kit, covered them with emergency blankets, and created a space that wouldn't win any comfort awards, but was infinitely better than sitting in the increasingly cold truck cab. Kate found herself following his instructions without her usual need to question or control, recognizing that this was his expertise, his domain. When he asked her to hold the tarp while he secured it with bungee cords, she held it. When he needed her to pass him supplies from the emergency kit, she passed them. It was oddly freeing, this temporary surrender of control to someone who actually knew what he was doing. You're really good at this, she observed as Ethan made a final adjustment to the tarp, ensuring water would run off the sides rather than pooling. 8 years responding to emergencies gives you a lot of practice at making the best of bad situations, he replied. Plus, I camp with Mia a lot. She's tough, inherited her mother's adventurous spirit, but I've learned to be prepared for anything when you're in the wilderness with a 7-year-old. They climbed into the makeshift shelter, arranging themselves as comfortably as possible in the confined space. The tarp above them drummed with rain, but the interior was surprisingly dry and protected from the wind. Ethan had set up a small battery-powered lantern that cast a warm glow, making the space feel less like a survival situation and more like an odd sort of camping trip. Hungry? Ethan pulled out energy bars from his kit. I've got granola, chocolate chip, or something that claims to be peanut butter, but mostly tastes like cardboard. Chocolate chip, Kate said, accepting the bar. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten an energy bar. Probably never, actually. Her meals came from high-end restaurants or delivery services that charged $20 for a salad, but sitting in this truck bed on a mountain in a storm, the simple chocolate chip bar tasted better than any Michelin-starred meal she could remember. Thunder crashed overhead, close enough to rattle the truck, and Kate flinched despite herself. Ethan noticed, his expression sympathetic. You okay? Not a huge fan of storms, Kate admitted. Or heights, which makes being stuck on a mountain road even more fun. We're safe here, Ethan assured her. The truck's well positioned, the shelter's solid, and this storm will blow itself out. We just have to wait it out. Waiting has never been my strong suit. Yeah, I got that impression. There was amusement in Ethan's voice, gentle teasing rather than judgment. You seem like someone who's used to making things happen, not waiting for them to happen. Control is the only reliable thing in life, Kate said. Everything else is just chaos waiting to disappoint you. That's a bleak worldview. That's a realistic worldview. People leave. Companies fail. The only thing you can depend on is yourself and your ability to handle whatever comes next. Ethan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Sarah used to say something similar after her parents died in her 20s. She'd built all these walls, convinced herself she was better off alone. It took me 2 years of consistently showing up, of proving I wasn't going anywhere, before she finally let me in. And then she died anyway, Kate said softly. That's what I mean. You let people in, you trust them, and then life takes them away or they betray you, or they prove they were never worth the risk in the first place. But that's not the whole story, Ethan countered. Yes, Sarah died. Yes, it destroyed me in ways I'm still recovering from, but those years we had together, the life we built, the daughter we created, the love we shared, that was real. It mattered. It still matters even though she's gone. I wouldn't trade those years for anything, even knowing how it ended. How? Kate heard the crack in her own voice. How do you do that? How do you love something knowing you could lose it? Because the alternative is not loving anything at all. And that's not safety, Kate. That's just a different kind of death. The words hung in the small space between them, weighted with truth Kate wasn't sure she was ready to accept. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their makeshift shelter, there was only the sound of rain on tarp and the soft glow of the lantern, and two people who'd somehow ended up in the most unlikely of circumstances. Tell me about Mia, Kate said, because she needed to think about something other than her own fears, her own carefully constructed walls. What's she like? Ethan's entire demeanor changed, softened in the way that seemed to happen every time his daughter was mentioned. She's fierce, smart as hell, stubborn as a mule, endlessly curious about everything. She wants to be a paleontologist when she grows up, though last month it was a firefighter like Daddy used to be, and before that it was a veterinarian who specializes in dinosaurs, which I had to explain wasn't really a viable career path. Kate found herself smiling despite everything. She sounds wonderful. She is. She's also exhausting and messy and has absolutely no concept of indoor voice. She asks approximately 8,000 questions per day, most of which I can't answer. Last week she wanted to know why the sky is blue, how birds know where to fly for winter, whether dinosaurs could have been different colors than we think, and if time is just something humans made up. All before breakfast. What did you tell her? About the sky? Light refraction and wavelengths, dumbed down to 7-year-old terms. The birds? Instinct and magnetic fields. Dinosaur colors? We don't really know, so she could be right. Time? Ethan laughed. I told her that was a question for philosophers and that she should ask me again in about 10 years when we could have that conversation properly. She's lucky to have you, Kate said. A parent who takes her seriously, who encourages her curiosity instead of shutting it down. That's rare. I'm the lucky one, Ethan replied. She's the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I left the fire department, the reason I build things instead of watching them burn. Everything good in my life now exists because of her. Kate thought about her own life, about her corner office and her apartment and her company that employed 300 people. What existed in her life because of love rather than ambition? What had she built that would matter if everything else disappeared? I envy that, she admitted quietly. Having something, someone, who matters more than anything else. I've spent so long building my company, protecting it, growing it, but I'm not sure I've ever loved it. I'm not sure I've loved anything in a very long time. It's not too late, Ethan said, to let yourself love something, to build a life instead of just a career. Before Kate could respond, a sound cut through the storm, distant but unmistakable. A child's cry, faint and terrified, carried on the wind between thunderclaps. Ethan's head snapped up, his body tensing with immediate alert. "Did you hear that?" "The wind?" Kate asked, even as the sound came again. Definitely not wind, definitely human, definitely young. "That's a kid." Ethan was already moving, pushing back the tarp and reaching for the waterproof flashlight from his emergency kit. "Someone's out there." "Ethan, wait." Kate grabbed his arm. "You can't go out in this. It's not safe. Maybe we're hearing things. Maybe it's just—" The cry came again, closer this time and more distinct. A child's voice calling for help, calling for Daddy, frightened and alone in the storm. "I have to check," Ethan said, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no debate. "A kid is out there in this storm, Kate. I can't just ignore that." "Then I'm coming with you," Kate said, because the alternative, sitting alone in this truck bed while he disappeared into a storm to find a child who might not even exist, was worse than facing her fear of heights and lightning and losing control. "Kate, I'm coming," she repeated firmly. "You might need help. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. And honestly, I'm not letting you disappear into a storm alone. We do this together or not at all." For a moment she thought he'd argue, would insist she stay safe in the shelter while he played hero again. But then he nodded, recognizing perhaps that this wasn't about capability or qualifications. It was about showing up, about not running away when things got hard. "Stay close to me," he said, handing her a second flashlight. "Watch your footing. The ground's going to be slippery. If I tell you to stop or go back, you do it immediately. Understood?" "Understood." They climbed out of the truck bed into the full fury of the storm, and Kate gasped as rain immediately soaked through her clothes as wind tried to push her off balance. Ethan's hand found hers, steadying her, and she gripped it like a lifeline as they moved away from the truck, toward where they'd heard the cry. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Is someone there? We're here to help." For a long moment there was nothing but wind and rain and the sound of Kate's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then, faint but definite, the response came. "Help, please! I can't find my daddy!" "Keep talking!" Ethan shouted. "Follow my voice! We're coming to you!" They moved carefully along the road, flashlight beams cutting through the rain, searching the rocky terrain. Kate's expensive shoes, completely inappropriate for mountain hiking, slipped on wet stone, and twice Ethan had to catch her before she fell. But they kept moving, kept calling, kept searching. And then, huddled against a rock formation maybe 30 yards from the truck, they found him. A boy, maybe 6 years old, soaked to the bone and shaking with cold and fear. His jacket was torn, his face was streaked with mud and tears, and his eyes, wide with terror, locked onto them like they were the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. "Please," the boy sobbed. "Please help. My daddy, he went to get help, and he didn't come back, and I'm scared and I'm cold, and I don't know where we are." Ethan was already moving, pulling off his own jacket to wrap around the child despite the rain that immediately began soaking his shirt. "Hey, buddy. Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. We've got you. What's your name?" "Tyler," the boy managed between sobs. "Tyler Morrison. We crashed. Our car went off the road, and Daddy said to stay put while he got help, but that was so long ago and he didn't come back." Kate felt her heart break watching this terrified child, felt every protective instinct she didn't know she possessed surge to life. She knelt beside Ethan, adding her voice to his reassurance. "Tyler, you did so good staying strong. You're very brave. We're going to help you find your daddy, okay?" "He might be hurt," Tyler said, his small voice cracking. "The crash was really bad. He was bleeding when he left. What if something happened to him? What if—" "We're going to find him," Ethan interrupted gently but firmly. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and warm. Can you walk? Are you hurt anywhere?" "My knee hurts," Tyler admitted, "and I'm really cold." "Okay, I'm going to carry you back to our truck. It's not far. Kate, can you light the way?" Kate nodded, taking the lead with her flashlight, as Ethan carefully lifted Tyler into his arms. The boy wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck and buried his face in his shoulder, his small body shaking with cold and shock. They made their way back to the truck slowly, carefully, Kate's light sweeping the path ahead while her free hand occasionally steadied Ethan when his footing slipped. Back at the truck, they got Tyler into the sheltered bed, wrapped him in emergency blankets, and Kate held him while Ethan grabbed more supplies. The boy clung to her, his shivers gradually lessening as the blankets and body heat began to warm him, and Kate found herself murmuring reassurances she hadn't known she possessed, stroking his wet hair with a tenderness that surprised her. "Tyler," Ethan said gently, crouching at the boy's level, "I need you to tell me about the crash. Where did it happen? Which direction did your daddy go when he left to get help?" Tyler's face scrunched up with concentration and fear. "We went off the road. There's a turn with a big drop, and Daddy was driving, and the rain was really hard, and we just slipped. The car hit some trees partway down. Daddy got me out, made sure I was okay, then told me to climb back up to the road and wait. He said he'd walk to find help because the phones didn't work. But he never came back." Kate met Ethan's eyes over Tyler's head, saw her own fear reflected there. A man, possibly injured, walking through this storm to find help for his son. How far had he gotten before something went wrong? Was he sheltering somewhere, waiting out the storm? Or had he fallen, gotten turned around, collapsed from his injuries? "Which direction?" Ethan asked again, his voice patient despite the urgency Kate could see in his posture. Tyler pointed back the way they'd come. "That way. There's a really sharp turn with rocks on one side. That's where we crashed." Ethan stood, and Kate could see him doing the calculations, weighing the risks against the necessity. "I need to find him," he said quietly to Kate. "A man's been out there for who knows how long, possibly injured in this weather. Every minute counts." "Then we go together," Kate said, surprising herself. "Tyler stays here in the shelter where it's warm. We search together." "Kate, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "You said it yourself earlier, showing up when it's hard, being brave enough to need people. Well, I'm showing up, and you might need me. An extra set of hands, an extra pair of eyes. You're not doing this alone." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Respect, gratitude, something deeper that Kate didn't have time to examine. He nodded. "Okay, together. But Tyler stays here, wrapped up warm. Buddy," he addressed the boy directly, "we're going to find your dad, but you need to stay in the truck where it's safe and dry. Can you do that for me?" Tyler nodded, his small face determined despite the tears still streaking his cheeks. "Find my daddy, please." "We will," Kate promised, with a certainty she didn't entirely feel but that the boy needed to hear. "We'll bring him back to you." They geared up again, Ethan pressing more emergency supplies into Kate's hands. A whistle, a space blanket, water. "If we get separated, blow the whistle. 3 short blasts. I'll come find you. And Kate, thank you. For this. For not running." "I'm done running," Kate said, and realized as the words left her mouth that she meant them in ways that went far beyond this storm, this mountain, this moment. They left Tyler wrapped in blankets with a flashlight and explicit instructions not to leave the truck bed no matter what, and then they were back in the storm, fighting their way against wind and rain toward where a man might be dying while searching for help for his son. The storm had teeth now, real vicious teeth that tore at their clothes and tried to rip the flashlights from their hands. Kate had never experienced weather like this. The kind of raw, primal fury that made you understand why ancient peoples had worshipped storm gods and made sacrifices to appease the sky. Rain came at them sideways, each drop hitting like a tiny stone, and the wind howled through the mountain pass with a sound that was almost human, almost mocking. They moved along the road methodically, Ethan leading with his flashlight sweeping in wide arcs while Kate followed close behind, her beam searching the edges where the pavement gave way to rocky slope. Every few steps, Ethan would stop and call out, his voice barely carrying over the wind, and they'd both freeze to listen for any response that never came. Kate's legs were already burning from the effort of moving uphill against the storm, her lungs working overtime in the thin mountain air, and her hands, those carefully manicured hands that had never done anything more strenuous than type on a keyboard, were starting to blister where she gripped the flashlight. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down, because somewhere out here was a man who'd left his terrified son to find help, and that man deserved better than to die alone on a mountain while they gave up because things got difficult. "There!" Ethan's shout cut through her thoughts, and she followed where his light pointed. The sharp turn Tyler had described, marked by a section of damaged guardrail that had clearly been hit recently. Metal twisted outward, paint scraped away, and beyond it, nothing but darkness and the suggestion of a steep drop. They approached the break in the guardrail carefully, and Kate felt her stomach lurch as she looked over the edge. The slope fell away at a terrifying angle, maybe 40 or 50 degrees, covered in loose rock and scrub vegetation and disappearing into darkness that their flashlights couldn't fully penetrate. About 30 feet down, she could make out the shape of a vehicle, a sedan, dark-colored, wedged at an angle between two pine trees that had probably saved it from tumbling even further down the mountainside. "That's gotta be it," Ethan said, his voice tight. He was already assessing the slope, looking for the safest path down. Tyler said his dad got him out and told him to climb back up, which means the dad went down, not up. He's somewhere below us. Or he made it back to the road and went in the other direction looking for help, Kate offered, though even as she said it, she knew it was wishful thinking. A man who'd left hours ago would have found something by now. A house, a passing vehicle, some form of assistance. The fact that Tyler had been alone meant his father had never made it to civilization. "We have to check," Ethan said, and Kate could hear in his voice that he was already committed to this, already planning the descent. He could be injured down there, unable to climb back up, could have taken shelter by the car waiting for the storm to pass. Or he could be lying somewhere between here and there with a broken leg, or worse, Kate said, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios with the same analytical precision she usually reserved for risk assessment in business deals. "Ethan, this slope is dangerous even in good weather. In this storm, with loose rock and poor visibility—" "I know the risks," Ethan interrupted, not unkindly. "I spent 8 years calculating risks and deciding whether the potential rescue was worth the danger. This man has a son waiting for him. That tips the scale for me. It always has." He was already pulling climbing rope from his pack. Of course he had climbing rope in his truck, because apparently Ethan Hale was prepared for every emergency scenario short of alien invasion, and securing it around a sturdy boulder near the road. Kate watched as he worked with practiced efficiency, hands moving through knots she didn't recognize but that looked complex and secure. "I'm going down," Ethan said, testing the rope with his full weight. "I'll search the area around the car, see if I can find any signs of which direction he went. You stay here, keep your light on me so I can see, and if anything goes wrong—" "I'm coming with you," Kate said, because apparently she'd completely lost her mind in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, at this time, she'd been in her office reviewing quarterly reports, and now she was volunteering to rappel down a mountain in a storm. "You said it yourself, 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. And what if you find him and he's hurt? You'll need help getting him back up." "Kate, this isn't like walking through a diner fire. This is technical climbing in dangerous conditions. One wrong step and you could fall, and I can't—" His voice cracked slightly. "I can't be responsible for you getting hurt." "You're not responsible for me," Kate said firmly. "I'm a grown woman making my own choice. I'm choosing to help. Now, are you going to show me how to use this rope, or are we going to waste time arguing while Tyler's father gets hypothermia?" Ethan stared at her for a long moment, and Kate stared back, refusing to flinch or back down. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but you follow my instructions exactly. No improvising, no risks. If I tell you to stop, you stop. If I tell you to go back, you go back. Deal?" "Deal." The next 5 minutes were a crash course in basic rappelling. Ethan showed Kate how to thread the rope through the carabiner on her borrowed harness. He had 2 in his truck, because of course he did. How to position her hands, how to control her descent by managing the rope tension. It wasn't elegant, and it definitely wasn't comfortable, but under Ethan's patient instruction, Kate began to understand the mechanics. "The key is controlled descent," Ethan explained, his voice raised to carry over the storm. "Don't try to go fast. Small steps, test your footing before you commit your weight. The rope will hold you, but you need to work with it, not against it. And Kate, keep your eyes on where you're going, not on the drop. Focus on the next step, not the big picture." Focus on the next step, not the big picture. Words that applied to more than just this climb, Kate realized. Maybe that had been her problem all along, so fixated on the grand vision, the ultimate goal, the corner office, and the IPO, and the validation of success, that she'd forgotten to pay attention to the actual steps she was taking, the actual life she was living. Ethan went first, descending with a confidence born of experience, his movements smooth and assured despite the wind and rain. Kate watched how he did it, trying to memorize the rhythm, the way he used his legs more than his arms, the way he scanned the terrain before each step. Then it was her turn, and she gripped the rope with hands that were already trembling from cold and adrenaline and fear. That first step over the edge was the hardest thing Kate had ever done. Every instinct screamed at her to pull back, to stay on solid ground, to not trust her life to a rope and a borrowed harness, and a man she'd known for less than 24 hours. But she thought about Tyler wrapped in blankets in the truck bed, about a father who'd walked into a storm for his son, and she made herself step backward into empty space. The rope caught her weight and held. Ethan's voice called up encouragement, and Kate took another step, then another, her world narrowing to the patch of rock in front of her and the rhythm of descent. Going down was terrifying and awkward, and nothing like the graceful, repelling scenes in action movies. Kate slipped twice, catching herself on the rope with jolts that left her hands burning and her heart hammering. Rocks came loose under her feet and tumbled down the slope, disappearing into darkness. Wind threatened to swing her into the rock face, and rain made every surface treacherous. But she kept going, step by careful step, until finally her feet touched relatively level ground, and Ethan was there to steady her. "You did great," he said, and the pride in his voice made Kate feel like she'd accomplished something far more significant than a 30-foot descent. "How are your hands?" She looked down and saw they were bleeding, the skin torn where rope had met palm through her inadequate grip. She hadn't even felt it during the climb, too focused on not falling to notice pain. "They're fine," she lied. Ethan pulled out a first aid kit, because naturally he had that too, and quickly bandaged her palms with efficient movements. "This will have to do for now. We'll clean them properly when we get back up." The wrecked sedan was even more damaged up close. The entire front end was crushed from impact with the trees, the windshield shattered into that distinctive spiderweb pattern of safety glass, and the driver's side door was caved in from where it had scraped along rock during the vehicle's tumble down the slope. Ethan shone his light into the interior, checking for any signs of life, but the car was empty. Blood streaked the driver's seat and the deployed airbag, confirming Tyler's report that his father had been injured. "Check for tracks," Ethan said, sweeping his light across the ground around the vehicle. "Look for disturbed earth, broken vegetation, anything that shows which way he went." They searched in expanding circles around the wreck, and it was Kate who found it. A clear drag mark in the mud, as if someone had stumbled and caught themselves with their hand. The mark pointed roughly southwest, away from the road and deeper down the slope. "Why would he go that way?" Kate asked. "The road is up. Shouldn't he have climbed back up?" "He was probably disoriented," Ethan said, following the track with his light. "Head injury from the crash, maybe. Add in stress and fear for his son, and he might not have had clear thinking. He could have been looking for easier terrain, or thought he saw lights in that direction. People do strange things when they're hurt and panicked." They followed the track carefully, moving away from the car and down into terrain that was even less forgiving. The slope here was scattered with boulders and deadfall, with sudden drops where erosion had carved away the soil, and Kate found herself grateful for Ethan's steady presence ahead of her, for his flashlight illuminating obstacles before she stumbled into them. The trail led them to a ravine, a slash in the mountainside maybe 15 feet deep and twice that across, carved by centuries of water runoff. Trees grew at odd angles from its sides, their roots exposed and grasping like skeletal fingers, and at the bottom, partially obscured by fallen branches and shadow, Kate could make out what looked like a darker shape. "There," she breathed, pointing. "Ethan, is that?" "Stay here." Ethan was already moving, finding a path down into the ravine with the same practiced skill he'd used on the main slope. Kate watched him descend, her heart in her throat, as he dropped out of sight behind the edge. Seconds stretched into eternity while she waited, rain streaming down her face, wind trying to push her backward, every terrible possibility cycling through her mind. Then Ethan's voice, muffled but urgent. "Kate, I found him. He's alive but unconscious. I need you down here." Kate didn't let herself think about the climb, about the danger, about all the very sensible reasons she shouldn't attempt to descend into a ravine in a storm. She just moved, using the same techniques Ethan had taught her, testing handholds and footholds, working her way down the rocky side with hands that screamed protest and legs that shook with exhaustion. At the bottom, she found Ethan kneeling beside a man in his mid-30s who was unconscious and soaked through, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Blood had dried on his temple from a nasty gash above his right eye, and his left leg was bent at an angle that made Kate's stomach turn. Broken femur, possible head injury, and he's hypothermic, Ethan reported, his hands already moving over the man's body in a practiced assessment. We need to stabilize him and get him warm, then figure out how to get him up and out of here. Kate knelt on the man's other side, pushing past the wave of helplessness that threatened to overwhelm her. She didn't know emergency medicine, didn't know how to set broken bones or treat head injuries, but she knew how to follow instructions, and Ethan was giving them. "Space blanket from my pack," Ethan said. "We need to prevent further heat loss. Then I need you to help me splint this leg before we try to move him." Kate pulled out the thin metallic blanket and helped Ethan wrap it around the unconscious man, tucking it carefully to preserve what little body heat remained. Then came the harder part, creating a splint from branches and rope, immobilizing the broken leg as much as possible. Ethan guided her through it step by step, his voice calm and patient, even as rain continued to pour down and thunder cracked overhead. "What's his name?" Kate asked, studying the man's face. He looked ordinary, like someone you'd see at a grocery store or a Little League game, not like someone dying at the bottom of a ravine. "Wallet says James Morrison," Ethan replied, checking the ID he'd found. "Same last name as Tyler. Definitely the dad. He's got a photo in here, wife and kid, at a beach somewhere. They look happy." The detail made it worse somehow, made James Morrison real in a way that Tyler's dad hadn't quite managed. This was a person with a life and family, and probably plans for next weekend that definitely hadn't included crashing his car on a mountain road. Kate found herself studying the photo over Ethan's shoulder. A smiling woman with Tyler's eyes, the boy maybe a year younger and grinning widely, and James with his arms around them both, his face lit with uncomplicated joy. "We have to save him," Kate said fiercely. "Tyler's already lost so much time with his dad tonight. He can't lose him permanently." "We're going to try," Ethan said. "But Kate, I need you to understand the reality here. We're at the bottom of a ravine in a storm with an unconscious man who needs immediate medical attention. Getting him back up to the truck is going to be extremely difficult and dangerous. And even if we manage it, we have no way to contact emergency services. We're on our own until this storm clears." "Then we work with what we have," Kate said, surprising herself with the steel in her own voice. "You've got medical training, I've got determination, and a decent amount of upper body strength from yoga classes I never thought would be useful. We have rope and supplies and the advantage of actually knowing where he is, which nobody else does. That's more than nothing." Something passed across Ethan's face. Respect, admiration, something warmer that Kate didn't have time to analyze. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make a harness that will let us haul him up. It's going to be slow and difficult, and you're going to be doing most of the actual pulling while I guide and spot from below. Can you handle that?" Kate looked at her bandaged, bleeding hands, at the steep ravine walls, at the unconscious man who was depending on two strangers to save his life. Could she handle it? She'd never done anything remotely like this. The hardest physical activity in her regular life was power walking to meetings, and occasionally taking the stairs instead of the elevator. "Yes," she said, because what else was there to say? "Tell me what to do." The system Ethan rigged was ingenious in its simplicity, a makeshift stretcher created from their tarp and spare rope, with a harness arrangement that would distribute James's weight and allow him to be pulled up the ravine without causing further injury to his broken leg. Ethan explained it all as he worked, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this kind of field improvisation dozens of times. "The trick is steady pressure," he said, securing the final knots. "Don't jerk the rope or pull too fast. Smooth and controlled like the rappelling. I'll be guiding from below, making sure he doesn't hit any obstacles. You'll be at the top, providing the main pulling force. It's going to hurt. Your hands are already injured, and this is going to make them worse. but it's the only way. I can take some pain, Kate said, and meant it. Compared to what James Morrison had endured, compared to what Tyler was going through waiting in that truck, her blistered hands were nothing. They positioned James carefully onto the makeshift stretcher, securing him with rope that Ethan tested 3 times before he was satisfied. The man didn't stir, even as they moved him, which worried Kate more than she wanted to admit. How bad was the head injury? How much time did they have before hypothermia or internal injuries or a dozen other medical complications turned this rescue into a recovery? Ethan helped Kate climb back up the ravine first, and she positioned herself at the top with the rope gripped in her bandaged hands, her feet braced against a large boulder that would give her leverage. From here she could see down into the ravine where Ethan was making final adjustments to the harness, where James Morrison lay wrapped in a space blanket and unconscious, and depending entirely on their ability to pull off something that probably violated several laws of physics and common sense. "Ready?" Ethan called up. "Ready?" Kate called back and tightened her grip despite the immediate flare of pain in her palms. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Pull!" Kate pulled, putting her whole body into it, using legs and core and arms in ways her yoga instructor would probably approve of and her manicurist would definitely not. The rope went taut, and for a horrible moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, incrementally, she felt movement. James's makeshift stretcher rose a few inches off the ravine floor. "Good, keep going, steady pressure." Ethan's voice provided guidance as Kate fell into a rhythm. Pull, reset her grip, pull again. Her hands were screaming now, the bandages already soaking through with blood from reopened blisters, and her shoulders burned with effort. Sweat mixed with rain on her face, and her designer blouse was probably destroyed beyond any hope of salvation, and she'd never felt more alive or more necessary than she did in this moment. Inch by inch, foot by foot, they raised James Morrison up the ravine wall. Ethan guided the stretcher around obstacles, protected his head from scraping against rock, adjusted the rope angle when it threatened to snag. Kate pulled until her muscles trembled and her vision started to narrow at the edges. And then she pulled some more because stopping meant failure, and failure meant a little boy losing his father, and that was not an option. "Almost there," Ethan called. 10 more feet." Kate didn't know where she found the strength for those last 10 feet. Her body felt like it was made of pain and exhaustion, every muscle screaming protest, her hands raw meat wrapped around rope. But she pulled and pulled and pulled until suddenly the stretcher crested the top of the ravine and James Morrison was on relatively level ground and Ethan was scrambling up behind him with a look of fierce triumph on his face. "You did it," he said, and Kate would have responded except she was too busy collapsing to her knees, her hands finally releasing the rope, her whole body shaking with reaction. "Kate, hey, you okay?" "Fine," she managed, though it came out as more of a gasp. "Just need a minute." "You were incredible." Ethan was beside her now, his own clothes soaked and his face streaked with mud, and the look he gave her was one Kate had never received from anyone in her entire life, pure, unfiltered admiration for who she was rather than what she'd accomplished. "I've worked with trained firefighters who couldn't have done what you just did." "Trained firefighters probably have better upper body strength and working hands," Kate said, looking down at her palms where blood was seeping through the bandages. "But I'm starting to understand why you loved that job. This feeling right now, knowing we might have just saved someone's life, it's better than closing any business deal." "Welcome to the addiction," Ethan said with a slight smile. "It's why people become first responders despite the terrible pay and the trauma and the toll it takes. That moment when you pull someone back from the edge, nothing else compares." They rested for maybe 60 seconds, all they could afford, before the reality of their situation reasserted itself. They had successfully extracted James Morrison from the ravine, which was a victory, but they were still at the bottom of a mountain slope in a storm with an unconscious man who needed medical attention they couldn't provide. Now came the even harder part, getting him back up to the road. The ascent was brutal in ways the descent hadn't been. With James secured to the stretcher and rigged to the climbing rope, Ethan positioned himself at the rear to guide while Kate went first, pulling from the front. The system meant that Kate was essentially climbing backward up a wet mountain slope while hauling a full-grown man behind her, And if there was a special circle of hell designed for this particular activity, she hadn't found it described in any literature. Her world narrowed to the immediate task. Find a handhold, test it, grip and pull. Move one foot, secure it, push. Haul the rope, gain a few inches, repeat. Don't think about the drop behind them. Don't think about her screaming hands or burning legs, or the fact that her heart felt like it might explode from her chest with the effort. Just the next handhold, the next step, the next small victory in an endless series. Rain continued to pour down, turning the slope into a waterfall in places where runoff created temporary streams. Lightning flashed close enough that Kate could smell ozone, and thunder arrived almost simultaneously, rattling her bones. More than once her foot slipped and she had to catch herself, had to hold the rope steady while James's weight threatened to pull her backward down the slope. Each time, Ethan's voice would come from behind, steady and confident, talking her through it. "You've got this, Kate. Reset your left foot on that rock. Good. Now pull. That's it. You're doing great." And somehow, impossibly, they were doing it. Gaining ground, getting closer to the road. Kate's arms felt like they might fall off, and she was fairly certain she'd never be able to type on a keyboard again with her destroyed hands. But James Morrison was still with them, still wrapped in his space blanket, still breathing despite everything. They were maybe 15 feet from the top, from that broken guardrail that marked safety and relative flat ground, when Kate's handhold broke. The rock she'd been gripping pulled free from the slope with no warning, and suddenly she was falling backward, the rope slipping through her ruined hands, gravity taking over with vicious efficiency. Time did that thing it does in emergencies, stretching and distorting so that Kate experienced the fall in horrible slow motion. She saw the rock tumbling away, saw her own hands reaching for anything to grab, felt her center of gravity shift past the point of recovery, felt the terror of knowing she was about to tumble down the slope, probably taking James and possibly Ethan with her. Then Ethan's hand locked around her wrist like a vice, and his other hand grabbed the climbing rope, and his voice cut through her panic with absolute command. "I've got you. Brace your feet. Now!" Kate's feet found purchase on something solid. Another rock, a tree root. She didn't know and didn't care, and she braced hard, throwing her weight forward instead of back. The rope stabilized. The fall stopped. For a moment they all hung there, Kate and Ethan and unconscious James Morrison, suspended in the storm by nothing but grip strength and determination and luck. "Kate, you still with me?" Ethan's voice was steady despite the strain Kate could hear underneath. "Still here," she managed, her heart trying to hammer its way out of her chest. "Sorry, No apologies, these things happen. Can you climb?" Kate looked at her hands, at Ethan's white-knuckled grip on her wrist, at the 15 feet that separated them from the road. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to give up, to admit defeat, to let someone else handle this because she was a CEO who built software companies, not a rescue worker who saved lives on mountains and storms. But that person, the CEO who built walls and maintained control and never let anyone see her struggle, that person had frozen in a diner fire while people needed help. This person, the one who'd rappelled down a ravine and pulled a man up from a cliff and nearly fallen to her death trying to save a stranger, this person was someone different, someone braver, someone who showed up even when it was hard. "Yeah," Kate said, and meant it. "I can climb." The last 15 feet took forever and no time at all. Kate climbed with Ethan's hand steadying her, with James's weight behind her providing strange motivation. Can't stop now, can't let go, have to finish this. Her hands were beyond pain now, moved into some numb territory where she could feel the ropes cutting deeper but couldn't quite connect that sensation to her body. Her legs shook with every step, and her breath came in ragged gasps that had more to do with exhaustion than the thin mountain air. But she climbed, hand over hand, step by step, until finally, her fingers closed around the twisted metal of the guardrail, and she was pulling herself onto the road, and Ethan was right behind her guiding James up and over the edge, and they'd done it. They'd actually done it. Kate collapsed onto the wet pavement, her body refusing to cooperate with any further demands, and for a long moment just lay there feeling rain hit her face and trying to remember how to breathe like a normal human being. Beside her, Ethan was checking James's vitals again, his movement still efficient despite what they'd just been through. Still unconscious but stable, Ethan reported. Pulse is weak but steady. We need to get him to the truck, get him warmer, and hope this storm breaks soon so we can get real help up here. The truck. Tyler. The little boy who'd been waiting for hours while his father lay at the bottom of a ravine. Kate forced herself to her feet, forced her protesting body to move, because they weren't done yet. They'd found James Morrison and pulled him back from the edge, but the real victory would be reuniting him with his son. They fashioned a new pulling system for the road portion, using the less steep terrain to their advantage. Kate took the front again, and together they dragged the makeshift stretcher along the pavement, moving slowly but steadily back toward where they'd left Ethan's truck and one terrified 7-year-old waiting for news. The walk back felt longer than the climb had been, maybe because Kate's body was now registering all the abuse she'd put it through, maybe because anticipation of seeing Tyler made time stretch. Her feet hurt in ways she didn't know feet could hurt, and she was fairly certain she'd pulled muscles in her back and shoulders that she hadn't known existed. The designer pants she'd put on in the motel this morning, was it really only this morning? It felt like a lifetime ago. Were torn and muddy beyond recognition, and she'd lost one shoe somewhere on the mountain, though she had no memory of when that had happened. But none of that mattered compared to the sight of Ethan's truck coming into view through the rain, to knowing they'd done something that mattered more than any quarterly earnings report or investor pitch. They'd saved a life. Maybe. Probably. If James Morrison woke up and his injuries weren't worse than they appeared and the storm eventually broke and help could arrive, Tyler must have been watching for them because the tarp shelter flew back before they were within 20 feet of the truck, and the small boy appeared at the edge of the truck bed, his face a mask of desperate hope and fear. "Did you find him? Did you find my daddy?" "We found him," Kate called out, and watched Tyler's face transform with relief so profound it brought tears to her own eyes. "He's hurt, but he's alive. We're bringing him to you now." What happened next would stay with Kate for the rest of her life. They got James situated in the truck bed, still on his makeshift stretcher, but now surrounded by every blanket and emergency heat source Ethan could produce. Tyler crawled to his father's side, his small hands reaching for James's face with a tenderness that broke and remade Kate's heart simultaneously. "Daddy?" The word was so small, so full of hope and fear and love. "Daddy, wake up. Please wake up. I waited just like you said. I stayed right here, and I was brave, and I didn't cry. Well, I cried a little, but then I stopped. And these people found me, and they went looking for you, and Daddy, please, please wake up." For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. James Morrison remained unconscious, his face pale and his breathing shallow, and Kate found herself praying to a God she hadn't addressed since she was a child, making bargains and promises in her head if only this man would wake up, if only this child wouldn't have to experience another devastating loss. Then James's eyes fluttered open. Unfocused at first, confused, but open. His gaze found Tyler, and something cleared in his expression, recognition, love, relief so intense it was almost painful to witness. "Tyler," he managed, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You're okay. Thank God. I tried to find help. I tried to get back to you, but His eyes closed again briefly, and when they reopened they were bright with tears. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry I left you alone." "You came back," Tyler said, and now he was crying freely, his small body shaking with sobs. "You came back, Daddy. That's all that matters." Kate had to turn away, had to press her fist against her mouth to contain the sob that wanted to escape. She found Ethan doing something similar, his jaw clenched and his eyes suspiciously bright as he pretended to organize supplies that didn't need organizing. Their gazes met, and in that moment, Kate understood something fundamental about this man that she'd missed during their disastrous dinner. Ethan Hale didn't run into burning buildings or descend into ravines because he was reckless, or because he had something to prove. He did it because he understood on a deep cellular level that some things mattered more than safety, more than comfort, more than any careful calculation of risk versus reward. Love mattered. Family mattered. Showing up for people who needed you mattered. And watching him now, soaked through and exhausted and radiating quiet satisfaction at a job well done, Kate realized she might be falling a little bit in love with him. The thought should have terrified her. Less than 24 hours ago, she'd dismissed this man as insignificant, as small town and simple, and beneath her notice. She'd spent 8 years building walls specifically to prevent this kind of feeling, this dangerous vulnerability that came from caring about someone who could leave or betray or disappoint. But standing in the rain on a mountain with destroyed hands and muddy clothes, and a heart that felt 3 sizes too large for her chest, Kate couldn't bring herself to care about the walls. They were still there, still protecting the wounded parts of her that Marcus had damaged, but they had cracks now. Significant cracks. Possibly fatal cracks. And for the first time in 8 years, that felt like progress rather than failure. Kate, Ethan's voice pulled her back to the present. We need to make a decision. James needs real medical attention, an ambulance, a hospital, doctors who know what they're doing. But we're still stuck up here until the storm clears enough for emergency vehicles to reach us. That could be hours. Kate looked at James Morrison, at the makeshift splint on his leg, and the dried blood on his temple, and the way his breathing was still too shallow. Then she looked at Tyler, whose small hand was clasped around his father's fingers, like letting go might cause him to disappear again. Finally, she looked at her own destroyed hands, at Ethan's burns from the diner fire, at the situation they'd somehow found themselves in through a combination of bad luck and worse weather and choices that kept leading them further into disaster. Then we wait, she said simply. We keep them warm, monitor James's condition, and wait for the storm to pass. It's all we can do. Your meeting? Ethan reminded her gently. The investors. $30 million. Kate pulled out her dead phone, looked at its blank screen, and felt something settle in her chest, a sense of priority maybe, or perspective, or just the understanding that some things couldn't be fixed by spreadsheets and presentations. I'll call them when we get off this mountain, explain what happened. If they decide not to invest because I missed one meeting due to saving a man's life in a storm, then they're not investors I want anyway. Your company will survive or it won't, Kate interrupted. And if it doesn't survive me missing one pitch meeting, then I haven't built something very robust, have I? Besides, 300 employees versus one 7-year-old who gets to keep his father? That's not actually a difficult calculation. Ethan studied her for a long moment, and Kate made herself hold his gaze, made herself not look away from whatever judgment or assessment she saw there. Finally, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face into something that made Kate's battered heart skip several beats. You're kind of amazing, you know that? He said quietly. I think I'm in shock and possibly concussed, Kate replied, but she smiled back, felt something warm and terrifying and wonderful unfurl in her chest. Ask me again when we're off this mountain and I've had coffee and I'm not covered in mud. I will, Ethan promised, and Kate believed him. They settled in to wait out the storm, all of them crowded into the truck bed with the tarp providing minimal shelter and emergency blankets providing minimal warmth. Kate held Tyler while Ethan monitored James, and they talked in quiet voices about nothing and everything, about Mia and dinosaurs, about carpentry and software companies, about the nature of courage and the definition of success, and whether happiness was something you built or something you found. The storm began to break around 10 in the morning, the rain lessening from deluge to steady downpour to gentle drizzle. By 11, Ethan was able to climb out and assess their situation. The fuel line leak was bad but patchable, and with careful driving they could make it down the mountain to where cell service might work and help could be summoned. They made the trip down slowly, Ethan nursing the damaged truck while Kate held Tyler in the cab, the boy having refused to be separated from his father even though James was more safely secured in the truck bed. Kate kept up a steady stream of conversation with Tyler, telling him about her company and her office building and the view from the 37th floor, and Tyler responded by telling her about his school and his best friend Marcus. Kate had flinched at the name, and how his dad made the best pancakes in the whole world. At mile marker 17, Ethan's phone flickered to life with 1 bar of service. Kate watched him make the emergency call with efficient calm, providing exact coordinates and clear information about James's injuries. Then he handed the phone to her and Kate stared at it for a long moment before making her own call. Her CFO answered on the first ring. Kate? Thank God. Where are you? The investors are here. They're asking. I'm not going to make it, Kate said, cutting through the panic in his voice. I'm stuck on a mountain road, my phone's been dead, and I've spent the last several hours helping rescue a man from a ravine. Michael, I need you to take the meeting. Take the meeting? Kate, I can't. These are major investors. They expect to hear from the CEO. They want to know their money will be managed by competent people who can handle unexpected situations, Kate interrupted. You're my CFO. You know this company better than anyone except me. You can present our vision, you can answer their questions, and you can close this deal. I trust you to do this, Michael. Can you do it? There was a pause, and Kate could almost hear the mental recalculation happening on the other end of the line. Finally, yeah, I can do this, but Kate, are you okay? You said something about a rescue? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'll explain everything when I'm back in the city. Go close that deal, Michael. Show them why Blackwell Industries is worth the investment. She hung up before he could ask more questions, before her own doubts could surface, before she could second-guess a decision that went against every controlling instinct she'd cultivated over the past 8 years. Then she handed the phone back to Ethan and said something she never thought she'd say. Whatever happens with that meeting, it's out of my hands now, and that's okay. Ethan looked at her with an expression Kate was beginning to recognize. That blend of admiration and affection, and something deeper that made her feel seen in ways she'd spent years trying to avoid. Who are you, and what did you do with the woman I had dinner with last night? She's still here, Kate said softly. She's just remembered there might be more to life than quarterly earnings reports and corner offices. She's still figuring out what that means, but she's willing to learn. The ambulance met them at the base of the mountain where the old road reconnected with the highway, lights flashing red and blue against the gray morning sky. Paramedics swarmed the truck with practiced efficiency, extracting James Morrison from the truck bed while firing questions at Ethan that he answered with the calm precision of someone who'd given countless incident reports. Kate stood to the side with Tyler, the boy's hand clutched in hers with surprising strength for someone so small, and watched as strangers took over the care of the man they'd pulled from a ravine. Is my daddy going to be okay? Tyler asked, for what must have been the 20th time, his voice small and scared despite the brave face he was trying to maintain. Kate knelt down to his level, ignoring the protest from her abused knees and the way the movement made every muscle in her body scream. The doctors are going to take very good care of him, she said, choosing her words carefully because Tyler deserved honesty, not platitudes. He's hurt, and he's going to need time to heal, but he's strong, and he's got something really important to fight for. He's got you. That matters more than you know. Ethan said you helped save him, Tyler said, studying Kate's face with the intense scrutiny only children could manage. He said you climbed down a mountain and pulled my daddy up even though you were scared. I was terrified, Kate admitted. I'd never done anything like that before. But sometimes being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the hard thing even when you're scared because someone needs you. My daddy always says that, Tyler said, and his eyes welled with fresh tears. He says courage is just love in work boots. The phrase hit Kate like a physical blow, so simple and so profound that it reframed everything she'd experienced in the last 24 hours. Ethan running into a burning diner wasn't recklessness. It was love for strangers translated into action. Descending into that ravine wasn't foolishness. It was love for a child who needed his father. And Kate's own actions, climbing and pulling and refusing to quit despite her body's protests, that wasn't courage she'd somehow magically acquired. It was love in its most basic form, love for humanity, for Tyler's desperate hope, for the simple conviction that people deserve to be saved. One of the paramedics approached, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient movements. Are you Tyler Morrison? Tyler nodded, suddenly shy with this new adult. Your dad's asking for you. He's pretty out of it, but he keeps saying your name. You want to see him before we transport? Tyler looked up at Kate, and she nodded encouragingly. Go ahead. I'll be right here. She watched Tyler scamper over to the ambulance, where James was secured on a proper stretcher now, watched the boy's small face transform with relief as his father's hand found his, watched James say something that made Tyler laugh even through his tears. The paramedics were explaining something to the boy, probably about the hospital and treatment and how long before he could see his dad again. But Kate couldn't hear the words over the sudden lump in her throat. "They're going to be okay." Ethan materialized beside her, his own attention fixed on the scene at the ambulance. "James has a long recovery ahead. That femur break is serious, and they're worried about possible internal injuries, but the paramedics think he'll make it. Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Kate corrected. "I couldn't have done any of that without you. Without your training, your equipment, your calm under pressure. I just pulled on some ropes." "You did a hell of a lot more than pull on some ropes, and you know it," Ethan said, and there was steel under the gentleness in his voice. "You rappelled down a mountain in a storm, descended into a ravine, hauled a full-grown man up a cliff face with bleeding hands, and nearly fell to your death doing it. Don't diminish what you did, Kate. Own it." Kate looked down at her hands, at the bandages that were soaked through and would definitely need to be changed by actual medical professionals, at the evidence of what her body had accomplished when her mind finally got out of the way. "I'm not sure the person who did those things is the same person who walked into Miller's diner last night. I don't know who I am anymore." "Maybe you're discovering who you've always been," Ethan suggested. "Maybe the CEO building software empires was just one version of Kate Blackwell, and the woman who climbs mountains to save strangers is another version, and they're both real." Before Kate could respond, the lead paramedic approached them, his expression shifting from professional to concerned as he took in their condition. "Either of you need medical attention? You both look like you've been through a war." "We're fine," Kate started to say, but Ethan cut her off. "She needs those hands looked at, and I should probably get the burns from last night checked. We were in the diner fire at Miller's." The paramedic's eyebrows rose. "Miller's diner? The gas explosion? That was you?" He looked at Ethan with new recognition. "You're Ethan Hale, the guy who pulled people out." "Just doing what needed doing," Ethan said with the same casual deflection Kate was beginning to recognize as his default response to praise. "Well, you're a damn hero is what you are. And your friend here too, from the sound of it." The paramedic gestured to a second ambulance that was pulling up. "Let's get you both checked out. Especially those hands. They look pretty rough." The next hour passed in a blur of antiseptic and bandages and gentle probing questions from a young EMT named Sarah, who reminded Kate uncomfortably of her own ambition at that age. Eager, efficient, certain that the path ahead was clear and conquerable. Sarah cleaned Kate's hands with careful thoroughness, applied antibiotic ointment to the worst of the blisters and cuts, and wrapped them in proper medical bandages that were significantly more effective than Ethan's field dressing had been. "You're lucky," Sarah said as she worked. "These could have been a lot worse. As it is, you're looking at probably 2 weeks of healing time if you keep them clean and don't do anything stupid like trying to type on a keyboard or lift heavy objects." 2 weeks? Kate stared at her wrapped hands in dismay. "I have a company to run. I need to be able to work." "Then invest in some voice-to-text software, because these hands need rest." Sarah's tone left no room for argument. "You've got second-degree burns in several places, deep tissue damage from rope trauma, and the beginning of an infection in your left palm that we've treated but need to monitor. Push them too hard, and you're looking at permanent nerve damage or worse. Is your company worth that?" Kate thought about the question seriously, turned it over in her mind the way she would evaluate any major business decision. Was the company worth permanent damage to her hands? Was any amount of success worth sacrificing her body's ability to heal? 24 hours ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. Now, sitting in an ambulance on a mountain highway after pulling a man from a ravine, the answer wasn't nearly as clear. "I'll rest them," she said finally. 2 weeks. Smart choice. Sarah finished the bandaging and moved on to checking Kate's vitals, pronouncing her miraculously free of any serious injuries beyond the hands and some impressive bruising that would make the next few days uncomfortable. "You should see your regular doctor in a few days for a follow-up, but I think you're going to be okay. You're tougher than you look." Kate laughed at that, a short burst of genuine amusement. "I don't feel tough. I feel like I've been hit by a truck and put through a blender." "Yeah, well, that's what happens when you climb mountains in storms to save people's lives. Your body's not used to that kind of activity." Sarah packed up her medical supplies with efficient movements. "But for someone who I'm guessing spends most of her time in an office, you held up pretty damn well. Be proud of that." Ethan emerged from the other ambulance with his own set of fresh bandages on his arms and a prescription bottle in his hand. The paramedic had made him change out of his soaked shirt, and he was now wearing an oversized EMT jacket that made him look younger somehow, more vulnerable. His eyes found Kate's immediately, and the relief in his expression when he saw she was okay made something warm unfurl in her chest. "How are the hands?" he asked, settling beside her on the ambulance's rear bumper. "Apparently I'm not allowed to use them for 2 weeks, which is going to make running a company interesting." Kate held up her wrapped hands, examining them like they belonged to someone else. "I'm also supposed to rest, avoid stress, and generally do everything that's the opposite of my normal life. So that should be fun." "Maybe it's the universe's way of telling you to slow down," Ethan suggested. "Take some time, reassess your priorities, figure out what you actually want your life to look like." "You sound like a fortune cookie." "Fortune cookies sound like me. I was saying this stuff first." Ethan's smile took the sting out of the words, made them teasing rather than critical. "But seriously, Kate, you just survived a fire and a storm and a mountain rescue in less than 24 hours. That's got to change your perspective at least a little bit." "More than a little bit," Kate admitted. She watched the first ambulance pull away with James and Tyler Morrison, lights flashing but no siren, a good sign, suggesting the urgency had passed and James was stable enough for routine transport. "I keep thinking about what Tyler said, about courage being love in work boots. That's you, that's what you do. Run into fires and climb down ravines because you love people, even strangers, enough to risk yourself for them." "And you," Ethan pointed out, "that's what you did too. Maybe you've been practicing that kind of love all along in different ways, building a company that employs people, creating software that helps businesses function, providing livelihoods for 300 families. Maybe it just took a crisis to show you that the capacity was always there." Kate wanted to believe that, wanted to think that the person who'd climbed that mountain was just a version of herself she hadn't met yet, rather than a completely different person. But the evidence of the last 24 hours suggested otherwise. The Kate Blackwell who'd walked into Miller's diner would never have done what she'd done on that mountain. That Kate had been too controlled, too protected, too convinced that emotional distance equaled strength. "What happens now?" she asked, because the immediate crisis had passed and they were sitting on an ambulance bumper in borrowed jackets with bandaged injuries, and Kate had absolutely no idea what the protocol was for this situation. Did they exchange phone numbers and promise to stay in touch, the way people did after shared trauma? Did they acknowledge that something had shifted between them on that mountain and try to figure out what that meant? Or did they just say goodbye and return to their separate lives, filing this experience under "that crazy time I helped rescue someone during a storm"? Ethan checked the time on his phone, which had somehow survived the mountain rescue in better condition than Kate's had. "It's almost 1 o'clock. Your investor meeting was at 10, so that's long over. My lumber delivery was supposed to be at 9, which I obviously missed. We're both soaking wet, covered in mud, and probably should not be driving anywhere in our current condition. So we're stuck on a highway with no transportation and no clear plan," Kate summarized. "Sounds about right for how this whole experience has gone. Actually, I called my neighbor while the paramedic was checking my burns. The one who's been watching Mia. She's going to drive up to get us. Should be here in about an hour." Ethan hesitated, then added, "She's bringing Mia with her. My daughter wants to make sure I'm okay, and I couldn't say no. I hope that's not weird for you." "Why would it be weird?" Kate asked, genuinely confused. "Because we barely know each other, and meeting someone's kid is usually a much later stage in whatever this is." Ethan gestured vaguely between them, and Kate felt her heart do something complicated and terrifying at the acknowledgement that there was a "this" to define. "I'd like to meet her," Kate said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "The girl who loves dinosaurs and purple paint and asks questions philosophers can't answer. She sounds remarkable." "She is," Ethan said simply. "She's also extremely direct and has no filter, so be prepared for some potentially invasive questions. Last week she asked our mail carrier why she had so many wrinkles and if that meant she was going to die soon." Kate laughed, genuine and unguarded. "I think I can handle a 7-year-old's interrogation. I've survived hostile board meetings and investor due diligence. How much harder can one child be?" The answer, as it turned out, was significantly harder. Mia Hale arrived in a whirlwind of energy and concern, bursting from her neighbor's car before it had fully stopped and racing toward Ethan with her arms outstretched. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you were in a diner fire and then a mountain rescue and that you're a hero, but I knew that already because you're my daddy and you're always a hero." Ethan caught her easily, sweeping her up despite the obvious protest from his injured arms, and buried his face in her dark curls. "Hey, baby girl." "I'm okay. Just a little banged up, but nothing serious." Mia pulled back to examine him critically, her brown eyes, so like her father's, scanning his face with intense scrutiny. "You have soot on your face, and your hands are all bandaged, and you smell like smoke and rain. That doesn't seem like nothing serious." "Okay, maybe slightly serious," Ethan conceded. "But I'm fine, I promise. The doctors checked me out and everything." Mia's attention shifted to Kate, and suddenly Kate found herself on the receiving end of a stare that felt uncomfortably like being evaluated by a tiny, adorable judge. "Are you the lady from the blind date that went wrong?" Kate blinked. Yes? I suppose I am?" "Daddy said you were mean to him at dinner and made him feel bad about being a carpenter." Mia's tone was matter-of-fact, not accusatory, but Kate felt shame crawl up her neck anyway. "But then there was a fire, and you both had to climb a mountain to save someone, so I guess you're friends now?" "Mia," Ethan said with gentle warning, "remember what we talked about regarding appropriate questions? You said to be nice to people even when you're curious about them," Mia recited dutifully. Then to Kate, "I'm being nice. I'm not calling you mean even though you were mean to Daddy. That's nice, right?" Despite everything, the exhaustion, the pain, the complete upheaval of her entire worldview in the last day, Kate found herself genuinely charmed by this small, fierce girl. "You're absolutely right. I was mean to your dad, and I shouldn't have been. I'm sorry about that." "You should tell him you're sorry, not me," Mia pointed out with impeccable 7-year-old logic. "I'm not the one whose feelings got hurt." "I did tell him I'm sorry. Last night, after the fire." "And did he accept your apology?" "Yes." "Good." Mia nodded with satisfaction, apparently having completed her investigation to her satisfaction. "Mrs. Chen says people who apologize and mean it are good people even if they did something bad first. Is that true?" "I think it's a good start," Kate said carefully, aware that she was being evaluated not just by Mia but by Ethan, who was watching this interaction with barely concealed amusement. "But I think the really important part is learning from your mistakes and trying to be better." "Are you going to be better?" Mia asked with the blunt curiosity of childhood. "I'm going to try," Kate promised. "Your dad is teaching me a lot about courage and kindness and what really matters. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm trying." Mia seemed to consider this for a long moment, her small face serious. Then she announced, "Okay, you can come to dinner at our house. We're having spaghetti because Daddy was supposed to make chicken, but now he's too tired because of the mountain rescue. Mrs. Chen is making the spaghetti instead, but she makes it the Italian way with lots of garlic, not the American way with too much sugar in the sauce." Kate looked at Ethan, who shrugged with an expression that clearly said, "I told you she had no filter." Then back at Mia, who was waiting expectantly for an answer to her dinner invitation. "I would love to come to dinner, but are you sure? Your dad has had a really long day and he probably needs rest, not company." "You're not company. You're the lady who helped save that man on the mountain," Mia said, as if this explained everything. "That's different. And besides, Mrs. Chen always makes too much spaghetti and Daddy can't eat it all by himself, and I'm supposed to eat vegetables first before I get seconds, so we need another grown-up to help eat it. It's practical." "Well, when you put it that way," Kate said, fighting a smile, "I suppose it would be rude to let all that spaghetti go to waste." "Exactly," Mia beamed, apparently having decided Kate was acceptable despite the rocky start. "And you can tell me about the mountain rescue and whether you saw any animals, because sometimes there are bears on the mountain and I really want to know if you saw any bears." "No bears," Kate assured her. "Just rain and rocks and one very brave man who kept fighting to get back to his son." "Tyler," Mia said knowledgeably. "Daddy told Mrs. Chen on the phone. Tyler is 7 like me, which means we're the same age, which means we should be friends because Daddy says it's important to have friends your own age who understand what it's like to be 7. The casual mention of Tyler's name, The easy assumption that friendship was simply a matter of shared age and circumstance reminded Kate of how simple life had been at 7, before Marcus, before corporate ladder climbing, before she'd learned that trust was a liability and vulnerability was weakness. When had she lost that ability to simply decide someone was worth knowing and open her heart accordingly? The drive back to Ethan's house took about 40 minutes, with Mrs. Chen navigating the mountain roads with the confidence of someone who'd lived in the area her whole life. Mia kept up a running commentary the entire time, pointing out landmarks and telling stories and asking Kate approximately 8,000 questions about everything from her job to her favorite color to whether she believed dinosaurs could have been different colors than scientists thought. Kate answered as best she could, finding herself genuinely engaged with this small person who had her father's warmth and her mother's adventurous spirit, or so Ethan said during a brief lull in Mia's interrogation. It was exhausting in the best possible way, this conversation with someone who hadn't learned yet that some topics were off limits, or that adults didn't always want to explain their reasoning. Ethan's house was exactly what Kate should have expected, but somehow still surprised her. A modest 2-story craftsman on a quiet street lined with mature trees, with a front porch that wrapped around the corner and window boxes that needed weeding. The paint was fresh, that same forest green she'd noticed on his flannel shirt last night, and the trim was crisp white. A tire swing hung from an old oak in the front yard, and garden beds showed evidence of recent planting, though Kate couldn't identify most of the vegetation. "It's not much," Ethan said as they pulled into the driveway, and Kate heard the slight defensiveness in his tone, the anticipation of judgment from someone who lived in a penthouse condo. "It's perfect," Kate said, and meant it. The house looked lived in and loved, like a place where people actually built a life instead of just storing their possessions between work commitments. "It looks like a home." Something in Ethan's expression softened at that, the defensiveness melting into pleased surprise. "Thanks. We've been here about 3 years since I left the fire department. Been fixing it up slowly. New roof last year. Updated the kitchen this spring. Mia's helping me plan the treehouse we're building in the back." "The purple one," Kate remembered. "The purple one," Ethan confirmed with a smile. "Though she's now lobbying for a rope ladder instead of regular stairs, which is giving me heart palpitations from a safety perspective." They climbed out of the car, and Kate was immediately struck by how different she must look from the woman who'd walked into Miller's diner last night. Her designer clothes were ruined beyond any hope of salvation. Her hair was a disaster of mud and tangles despite her attempts to finger comb it into submission, and her bandaged hands made her look like she'd lost a fight with a particularly aggressive paper shredder. She probably smelled like wet dog in desperation, and she'd never felt less like a successful CEO and more like a disaster survivor. And somehow, she didn't care. Not in the way she would have cared yesterday, when her appearance was armor and presentation was power. This was different. This was the evidence of something real, something that mattered, written on her body in bruises and bandages. Inside, the house was as welcoming as the exterior had promised. Hardwood floors that showed wear but were clean and polished, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive, and evidence of Mia everywhere. Art projects on the refrigerator, a Lego creation taking over half the coffee table, dinosaur books stacked on every available surface. Photos lined the walls, and Kate found herself drawn to them, studying the visual history of Ethan's life. There was his wedding photo, Ethan younger and clean-shaven, with a woman who had Mia's eyes and a smile that lit up the frame. Family photos showing a baby growing into a toddler, always with at least one parent in the frame, and usually both. Then a subtle shift in the collection, images with just father and daughter, Ethan's smile still present but carrying an edge of sadness that was painful to witness. And finally, more recent photos where that sadness had eased into something more peaceful. Mia covered in pain at an art class, Ethan and his daughter hiking, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. "That's my mama," Mia said, appearing at Kate's elbow to point at the wedding photo. "She died when I was little, but Daddy says she loved me very much, and that love doesn't stop just because someone goes away." Kate knelt down again, meeting Mia at eye level. "Your daddy's right about that, and your mama was very beautiful. Daddy says I look like her, especially my eyes. He says sometimes he looks at me and sees her smile, and it makes him happy and sad at the same time." Mia tilted her head, studying Kate with that intense curiosity. Do you have a mama and daddy? I did, but they died when I was in college, a long time ago. Were you sad? Very sad. For a long time. Are you still sad? Kate considered the question seriously, because Mia deserved honesty. Sometimes. But mostly I remember the good parts now instead of just missing them. That's good, Mia said with the gravity of someone much older. Daddy says remembering the good parts is how we keep people with us, even when they're gone. Then, with a child's ability to shift topics without transition. Do you want to see my dinosaur collection? I have 47 dinosaurs and I know all their names and which period they lived in and what they ate. I would love to see your dinosaur collection, Kate said, and let herself be pulled toward Mia's room by a small hand that gripped hers with surprising strength, careful not to squeeze the bandaged parts. The next hour passed in a blur of dinosaur facts and spaghetti preparation, and the comfortable chaos of family life. Mrs. Chen proved to be a delightfully forthright woman in her 60s, who asked Kate pointed questions about her intentions toward Ethan while simultaneously teaching her how to properly cook garlic for pasta sauce. Mia maintained her role as combination tour guide and interrogator, showing Kate her room and her treehouse plans and her collection of rocks that she'd found on various hikes with her father. And Ethan moved through it all with quiet competence, changing into dry clothes and checking in with the hospital about James Morrison's condition and setting the table while simultaneously answering Mia's questions about the rescue. Kate watched him navigate the domestic rhythms of his life and felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that this was what she'd been missing. Not the specific details. She didn't need a house in the suburbs or a 7-year-old or a wall of family photos. But this feeling of being rooted in something real, of building a life instead of just maintaining a career, of having people who mattered more than quarterly earnings reports. Dinner was chaotic and warm, with Mia doing most of the talking and Mrs. Chen providing occasional interjections, and Ethan catching Kate's eye across the table with expressions that ranged from apologetic to amused to something warmer that made Kate's breath catch. The spaghetti was excellent. Mrs. Chen hadn't been exaggerating about the garlic, and Kate found herself eating more than she had at any meal in recent memory, actually tasting the food instead of just consuming fuel between meetings. So what happened with your big meeting? Ethan asked during a rare lull in Mia's dinosaur facts monologue. Did your CFO take it? Kate pulled out her phone, which had finally been charged enough to turn on, and scrolled through her emails. There were dozens from various staff members, most expressing concern about her absence and confusion about the rescheduled presentation. But the one that mattered was from Michael, time-stamped at 11:47 a.m. She opened it, her heart hammering as she read, Kate, meeting went better than expected. Investors were actually impressed that you trusted me to handle it, said it showed depth and leadership team. They committed to the full $30 million, pending usual legal review. Also said they want to meet you when you're back from your mountain adventure. Their words, apparently word spread fast about the rescue. You've built something good here, and I'm honored you trusted me with it today. Hope you're okay. Michael. Kate read the email twice, then a third time, trying to process what it meant. She'd missed the most important meeting of the fiscal year, had handed it off to someone else with minimal preparation, had violated every principle of control and direct oversight she'd built her career on. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Better than worked. It had succeeded in ways that went beyond the funding itself, demonstrating to major investors that Blackwell Industries was more than just Kate Blackwell with a good idea. They committed, she said, looking up at Ethan with wonder in her voice. All $30 million. Michael closed the deal. That's fantastic. Ethan's grin was genuine and infectious. See? The world didn't end because you missed one meeting. More than that, Kate said slowly, still processing. It showed them I've built a real company, not just a one-woman show. That's what they said. They were impressed I trusted my team enough to hand off something this important. I've been so busy trying to control everything, to prove I don't need anyone, that I never considered whether that might actually be limiting what we could become. So what are you going to do differently? Ethan asked. It was a good question, one that Kate didn't have a ready answer for. What would she do differently? She'd spent 8 years building Blackwell Industries into what it was, And most of that building had been done through sheer force of will and obsessive control of every detail. Could she really change that now? Did she want to? I don't know yet, Kate admitted, but I think I need to figure out what I'm building toward, not just what I'm building away from, if that makes sense. Building away from? Mia piped up, proving that her attention had been split between her spaghetti and the adult conversation. What does that mean? Kate looked at this small girl who had no filter and all the curiosity in the world and decided she deserved an honest answer. It means that sometimes people work really hard on something not because they love it, but because they're trying to avoid thinking about something painful. Like if you didn't want to remember a time you were sad, you might keep yourself so busy you didn't have time to think about it. But that doesn't make the sad go away, Mia said, with the wisdom of someone who'd lost a mother at 3. It just makes you tired and still sad. You're right, Kate said softly. It doesn't make the sad go away. It just postpones dealing with it. So what's your sad? Mia asked with characteristic directness. Kate opened her mouth to deflect, to change the subject, to protect herself the way she always had. But something about this house and this family and this day that had stripped away every careful defense made her answer honestly instead. I loved someone once who betrayed me, stole my work, and used it to hurt me. And I've spent 8 years making sure no one could ever do that again, building walls so high that nobody could get close enough to hurt me. Kate paused, then added quietly, but walls that keep pain out also keep love out. I'm only just figuring that out now. Mia considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important questions. Daddy says that after Mama died, he had to choose between being safe or being alive. He says he chose alive for me because I needed a daddy who could feel things, not a daddy who was just going through the motions. Maybe you need to choose alive too. Kate felt tears prick her eyes, actual tears, which she hadn't allowed herself to cry in years. This 7-year-old girl had just articulated what Kate had been dancing around for the last 24 hours, the fundamental choice that had been lurking under every decision since the diner fire. Safe or alive? Protected or present? Walls or windows? Maybe I do, Kate said, and met Ethan's eyes across the table. He was watching her with an expression that made her heart do complicated things, something tender and hopeful and patient all at once. Maybe it's time to choose alive. After dinner, Mrs. Chen excused herself with a knowing look that suggested she understood exactly what was happening and approved wholeheartedly. Mia lobbied hard to stay up and show Kate more of her dinosaur collection, but eventually succumbed to the reality that 7-year-olds needed bedtime even after exciting days. Ethan carried her upstairs for her bath and bedtime routine, and Kate found herself alone in the living room, surrounded by evidence of a life so different from her own it might as well have existed on another planet. She picked up one of the framed photos from a side table. Ethan and Mia at what looked like a carnival, both of them covered in cotton candy and laughing at something. The pure, uncomplicated joy on their faces was so foreign to Kate's experience that it almost hurt to look at. When was the last time she'd felt joy like that? Not satisfaction from closing a deal or pride from hitting a milestone, but actual joy, the kind that came from being fully present in a moment with someone you loved. She really likes you. Ethan's voice came from behind her, and Kate turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, watching her with that expression she was beginning to recognize. Mia, she doesn't warm up to new people that easily, but she decided you were okay. I like her too, Kate said, returning the photo to its place. She's remarkable, smart and curious, and so completely herself without apology. I envy that. You could learn from her, Ethan suggested, moving into the room. The whole being yourself without apology thing. I think you'd be good at it if you let yourself try. I'm not sure who myself even is anymore, Kate admitted. Kate sat. 24 hours ago, I would have said I was Kate Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries, builder of empires and taker of no prisoners. Now I don't know. Someone who climbs mountains and storms and pulls strangers from ravines and cries at dinner tables while talking to 7-year-olds about choosing to be alive. Maybe you're both, Ethan said, settling onto the couch and gesturing for Kate to join him. Maybe you're the CEO and the mountain climber, The empire builder and the person who shows up when people need help. Maybe you've always been both, but you only let yourself acknowledge one side. Kate sat beside him, leaving careful space between them, even though her body wanted to lean into his warmth. What you said on the mountain about people building their lives around their wounds, I can't stop thinking about that. You're right. I've been building around the wound Marcus left, constructing an entire existence designed to ensure I never feel that vulnerable again. But in the process, I think I might have made myself invulnerable in ways that also made me inaccessible, untouchable, alone. So stop, Ethan said simply. Stop building around the wound and start building towards something better. It won't be easy and it won't happen overnight, but Kate, you're capable of incredible things when you let yourself be vulnerable. I watched you today. Watched you push past fear and exhaustion and pain because someone needed help. That's not who you think you are, but it's definitely who you are. Own it. Kate wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why today was an anomaly and why she couldn't possibly sustain this version of herself in her real life. But sitting in this comfortable living room, in a house that felt more like a home than anywhere she'd lived in years, she couldn't quite make the arguments land. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe the person who'd climbed that mountain wasn't a stranger, but just a part of herself she'd been suppressing for 8 years. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. How to be open again. How to trust people. How to build something that's about connection instead of just protection. You start small, Ethan said. You take risks with people who've proven they're safe. You practice being vulnerable in low-stakes situations until it becomes more natural. You accept that sometimes people will disappoint you, and that's okay because the alternative is missing out on all the people who won't. Is that what you did? After Sarah? Eventually, it took time. A lot of time. There were years where I went through the motions of living without really being alive, the way Mia described it. Work and parenting and keeping everything running, but not really feeling anything beyond the basics. Then one day I realized Mia was watching how I navigated the world, learning from my example. If I taught her that love equals pain, and it's safer to stay closed off, that's what she'd carry into her own relationships. So I made a choice to try again, to let people in, to risk getting hurt because the alternative was teaching my daughter to live a half-life. Kate thought about that, about the responsibility of being an example even when you didn't ask for it. Her employees watched how she handled stress and setbacks. Her board watched how she made decisions under pressure. What was she teaching them by staying closed off, by trusting no one, by building an empire that was really just an elaborate defense mechanism? What if I try and it doesn't work? Kate asked. What if I open up and get hurt again? Then you'll heal, Ethan said matter-of-factly, the same way you healed from Marcus. It won't be fun, but you'll survive it. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for, Kate Blackwell. You pulled a man up a mountain with bleeding hands. You can handle a broken heart. The casual confidence in his voice made Kate want to believe him, want to think that maybe she really was strong enough to risk vulnerability again, but belief required action. And action required letting go of control, and that was still the hardest thing Kate could imagine. Can I ask you something? Kate said after a moment. Why did you offer to drive me this morning? After how I treated you at dinner, after I made you feel small and dismissed everything about your life. Why did you help me? Ethan considered the question seriously. Honestly, part of it was practical. You needed help. I was going in that direction anyway. It made sense. But part of it was curiosity. I kept thinking about what you said at dinner, about not depending on anyone and building your own empire. It reminded me of Sarah before I really got to know her. All that armor, all that determination to not need people. And I wondered if maybe, under all that armor, you were someone worth knowing. Turns out I was right. You couldn't have known that at the time, Kate protested. I gave you no reason to think I was anything other than what I showed you. You apologized, Ethan said simply. After the fire, when you could have just run away and never seen me again, you stayed. You approached me, you apologized, and you meant it. That told me there was more to you than the defensive CEO act. People who are truly cold don't apologize. They just move on. Kate felt something crack open in her chest. Some last defense crumbling under the weight of Ethan's steady regard. He saw her, really saw her. in ways that were terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And instead of running from that visibility, some part of her wanted to lean into it, to see what happened when she stopped hiding. "I should probably go," she said, even though it was the last thing she wanted. "It's late, and you've had an exhausting day, and I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "Where are you planning to go?" Ethan asked with amusement. "Your car's still on that mountain with a flat tire, remember? And even if you called a cab, where would it take you? Your penthouse is back in the city, hours from here." Kate had somehow forgotten that she was essentially stranded, that her carefully controlled life had been completely upended by circumstances beyond her planning. "I can get a hotel. There must be something nearby." "Or you could stay here," Ethan suggested. "I have a perfectly good guest room that Mia and I set up for when my sister visits. Clean sheets, private bathroom, significantly more comfortable than that motel you stayed in last night. No strings, no expectations. Just a place to rest until we can figure out logistics in the morning." The offer was tempting in ways that had nothing to do with the guest room's comfort level and everything to do with not wanting to leave this house, this warmth, this feeling of being seen and accepted despite every flaw. But accepting meant staying vulnerable, meant continuing to exist in this space where her usual defenses didn't work. "Okay," Kate heard herself say. "Thank you. I'll stay." Ethan's smile was warm and genuine, and he stood to show her to the guest room. "Fair warning, Mia will probably appear at your door around 6:30 in the morning, wanting to know if you've had breakfast yet and whether you want to help her build something with Legos. She has very strong opinions about breakfast timing and collaborative building projects." "I'll be ready," Kate promised, following him up the stairs. The guest room was exactly as advertised, comfortable and clean, with a bed that looked infinitely more appealing than any furniture Kate had encountered in the last day. Ethan provided her with borrowed clothes for sleeping, sweatpants and a t-shirt that would be comically oversized on her but were soft and clean, and showed her where the bathroom supplies were kept. "Kate," he said, pausing in the doorway, "what you did today, on that mountain, pulling James up, refusing to quit even when you were terrified, that was real courage. Don't diminish it or write it off as a one-time thing. That's who you are when the walls come down. Remember that." Before Kate could respond, he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. She changed into the borrowed clothes and climbed into the guest bed, her body finally registering how exhausted it was after everything it had been through. Her hands throbbed despite the pain medication the paramedic had given her, and her muscles had moved past soreness into outright rebellion. But lying there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of a house settling around her, so different from the sterile silence of her penthouse, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years. She felt hope. Not the abstract hope of business success or market opportunities, but real, personal hope about the possibility of building a different kind of life. A life that included risk and vulnerability and 7-year-olds asking impossible questions. A life that looked more like Ethan's lived-in warmth than her carefully curated achievement. She pulled out her phone one last time, scrolling through the dozens of emails that had accumulated during her mountain adventure. Most could wait, but there was one she needed to send before she could sleep, a message to her executive team that would set the tone for whatever came next. "Team," she typed with awkward thumbs since her bandaged hands made regular typing impossible. "I know today was chaotic and my absence created uncertainty. I apologize for that. But I want you to know that being unable to attend the investor meeting myself was one of the best things that could have happened. It showed me, and showed our investors, that we've built something bigger than any one person. Michael, you were extraordinary. The rest of you, your ability to adapt and support each other in my absence was exactly what we need as we grow. I'm taking the next 2 weeks to recover from some injuries and to reassess our strategic direction. During that time, I'll be trusting each of you to run your departments with minimal oversight. I believe in the team we've built. It's time I started showing that by actually trusting you to do your jobs. More to come next week. Thank you for your flexibility today. Kate." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then set the phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd figure out logistics, getting her car fixed, returning to the city, explaining to Rebecca what had happened on what was supposed to be a simple blind date. Tomorrow she'd start the difficult work of rebuilding her life around something other than fear and control. But tonight, she'd sleep in a borrowed bed in a stranger's house that somehow felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years, and let herself imagine what it might feel like to choose being alive. Mia appeared at Kate's door at exactly 6:27 in the morning, which was close enough to Ethan's prediction to be impressive. The little girl was already dressed in overalls covered with dinosaur patches, and carrying what appeared to be an extremely complex Lego creation that defied Kate's understanding of physics. "You're awake," Mia announced with the volume of someone who hadn't yet learned about indoor voices. "Daddy said I had to wait until at least 6:30, but I could see light under your door, so I knew you weren't sleeping anymore. Do you want pancakes? Daddy makes really good pancakes on Saturdays. It's Saturday, right? I think it's Saturday. Sometimes after exciting days, I lose track of which day it is." Kate sat up, wincing as every muscle in her body reminded her of yesterday's mountain adventure. "It's Saturday," she confirmed, her voice rough from sleep. "And pancakes sound wonderful." "Good, because Daddy's already making them, and he sent me to get you, but also to show you this." Mia held up the Lego creation, which Kate could now see was meant to be some kind of dinosaur. "It's a Spinosaurus. They lived in the Cretaceous period, and they ate fish, and they had these really cool spines on their backs that might have been for temperature regulation, or maybe for displaying to mates. Scientists don't know for sure yet. Do you like it?" "It's amazing," Kate said honestly, studying the intricate construction. "You built this yourself?" "Mostly. Daddy helped with the spine part because it kept falling over, but I designed it." Mia set the dinosaur carefully on the nightstand. "You can look at it while you get dressed. Daddy left you some clean clothes. They're my Aunt Lisa's from when she visited last month. She's about your size. Well, maybe a little shorter, but close enough." True to Mia's word, there was a small stack of borrowed clothes on the dresser: jeans, a soft flannel shirt, and undergarments that still had store tags attached. Ethan must have gone shopping at some point last night or very early this morning, which meant he'd been thinking about Kate's comfort enough to make sure she had fresh clothes. The gesture made something warm settle in her chest, that now familiar feeling of being cared for in practical, tangible ways. She dressed carefully, her bandaged hands making everything take twice as long as it should have. The clothes fit well enough, though the jeans were slightly loose, and the flannel was cozier than anything Kate normally wore. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hair still disaster adjacent despite her best efforts, face free of the makeup she usually wore like armor, clothes that suggested weekend hiking rather than board meetings. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just less defended. More real. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like heaven. Ethan stood at the stove flipping pancakes with the same competent efficiency he'd shown during the mountain rescue, and the table was already set with plates and syrup and fresh fruit. He'd changed into clean jeans and a green Henley that made his eyes even warmer, and his hair was still damp from a shower. The domestic scene was so far removed from Kate's normal Saturday routine of reviewing reports in her penthouse that it felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. "Morning," Ethan said, looking up with a smile that did complicated things to Kate's heart rate. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Kate admitted, sliding into a chair at the table. "Your guest bed is significantly more comfortable than my $1,000 mattress." "That's because it's had actual humans sleep in it recently," Ethan observed, plating pancakes with practiced ease. "Mattresses need breaking in. They don't reach peak comfort when they're only used for 5 hours a night between work sessions." "How did you know?" "Rebecca might have mentioned that you tend to work until you pass out and then wake up to start working again," Ethan said with gentle amusement. "She's worried about you. Has been for a while." Kate accepted the plate of pancakes he offered, golden and perfectly cooked with butter melting into their surface. "Rebecca worries too much. I'm fine." "Are you?" Ethan settled into the chair across from her with his own plate while Mia climbed into her seat and immediately began constructing some kind of pancake and fruit tower. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been running from your own life for 8 years. And that's not fine, Kate. That's just exhausting." The observation should have made Kate defensive, should have triggered all her usual responses about successful people working hard and achievement requiring sacrifice. But sitting in this warm kitchen with pancakes dissolving on her tongue and a 7-year-old building architectural marvels out of breakfast food, she couldn't quite muster the energy for her standard deflections. "You're right," she said instead. "I have been running. From Marcus, from vulnerability, from the possibility that if I let people in, they might hurt me the way he did. I just didn't realize how tired I was until I stopped long enough to notice." "So what are you going to do about it?" Ethan asked, and Kate appreciated that he wasn't offering solutions or trying to fix her, just asking the question and trusting she could find her own answer. "I don't know yet," Kate said honestly, "but I think the 2 weeks of enforced rest from these hand injuries might be a good time to figure it out. Step back from the day-to-day operations, let my team actually run things, and reassess what I'm building and why." "Can I make a suggestion?" Ethan asked. "Please." "Don't go back to the city right away. Stay here for a few days. Not in my house," he added quickly, "though you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but in town. There's a bed and breakfast about 10 minutes from here, run by a woman named Margaret, who makes the best cinnamon rolls in 3 counties. Stay there, rest, let yourself breathe without the pressure of your normal environment. See what comes up when you're not running." Kate's first instinct was to refuse. She had a company to run, a life to get back to, responsibilities that couldn't just be abandoned because she'd had an emotionally transformative experience on a mountain. But then she remembered the email she'd sent last night, the one where she'd told her team she trusted them to handle things without her constant oversight. If she immediately rushed back to micromanage everything, what message would that send? That she didn't actually trust them? That her words about building a real company were just words? "Okay," she heard herself say, "I'll stay, a few days at least, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "You let me see the treehouse you're building. Mia's been talking about it nonstop, and I want to see what purple paint and rope ladder dreams look like in structural form." Ethan's smile was warm and genuine. "Deal, though fair warning, it's currently more platform in a tree than actual house. We're taking it slow, making sure every step is safe before we move to the next one." "That's very you," Kate observed. "Careful, methodical, making sure the foundation is solid before building higher." "It's kept me and Mia safe so far," Ethan replied. "Though I'll admit yesterday's mountain adventure was probably the least methodical thing I've done in years. Pure instinct and improvisation." "It worked, though," Kate pointed out. "We saved James Morrison. Tyler gets to keep his father. That's worth a little improvisation." Speaking of which, Ethan pulled out his phone and showed Kate a text message. "I heard from the hospital this morning. James is stable, out of surgery for the leg, and asking to speak with us when we can visit. They think he's going to make a full recovery thanks to how quickly we got him to treatment." Kate felt emotion swell in her throat, that now familiar feeling of having contributed to something that mattered beyond quarterly earnings. "Can we go today? I'd like to see him. And Tyler." "I was hoping you'd say that," Ethan said. "I told them we'd stop by this afternoon. Mia wants to come too. She's made Tyler a Lego dinosaur as a get-well present." "It's a stegosaurus," Mia interjected around a mouthful of pancake. "Because stegosaurus means roofed lizard, and Tyler's daddy needs to get better so he can go home, which has a roof. It's symbolic." Kate looked at this remarkable child who thought in symbols and built Lego dinosaurs for boys she'd never met, and felt her heart crack open a little further. "That's incredibly thoughtful, Mia." "I know," Mia said, with the confidence of someone stating obvious facts. "Daddy says thoughtfulness is a superpower, like being really strong or really fast, except better because it makes people feel less alone." "Your daddy's very wise," Kate said, meeting Ethan's eyes across the table. "He has his moments," Ethan replied with a slight smile. After breakfast, Ethan made good on his promise to show Kate the treehouse in progress. They walked through the backyard, which was larger than Kate had expected, with garden beds and a small workshop and that impressive old oak tree with the tire swing. The treehouse was about 8 feet off the ground, currently consisting of a sturdy platform with partial walls and the beginnings of a roof structure. A regular ladder provided access, though Kate could see where Ethan had marked places for the rope ladder Mia was lobbying for. "It's wonderful," Kate said, studying the craftsmanship. Every board was carefully placed, every joint secure. This wasn't some thrown-together backyard project. This was being built with the same attention to detail and love that Ethan brought to everything he did. "Mia's going to love it." "That's the plan," Ethan said, running his hand along the platform railing with obvious pride. Should be finished in another month or so. We work on it together most weekends. She's learning to measure and cut and nail. Important skills. For someone who wants to be a paleontologist? Kate asked with amusement. For someone who wants to understand how things are built, Ethan corrected. The specific application doesn't matter as much as the foundation of knowing how to create something with your own hands, how to take raw materials and turn them into something useful and beautiful. That's a skill that translates across any field. Kate thought about her own company, about how she'd built it from nothing using different tools but the same fundamental principles, taking raw materials, in her case, code and concepts, and creating something useful. Maybe she and Ethan weren't as different as she'd initially thought. They just worked in different mediums. Can I ask you something? Kate said, settling onto the edge of the platform with her legs dangling. Ethan joined her, their shoulders almost touching. Yesterday on the mountain, when we were pulling James up and I almost fell, you grabbed me without hesitation. Didn't even think about whether it might pull you down too. Why? Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Because letting you fall wasn't an option I could live with. Yeah, there was a risk we'd both go down. But the alternative, watching you fall, knowing I could have tried to catch you and didn't, that would have been worse than any physical injury. Some risks are worth taking. Even when they might destroy you? Especially then, Ethan said firmly. Kate, I spent 4 years after Sarah died playing it safe, minimizing risk, avoiding pain, keeping everything controlled and manageable. And you know what I learned? Safety isn't the same as being alive. It's just a slower way of dying. I'd rather risk falling off a mountain trying to save someone than spend another day in that half-life of just going through motions. Kate felt those words settle into her bones, rewriting something fundamental about how she understood courage and vulnerability. She'd spent 8 years confusing safety with strength, isolation with independence. But real strength was what Ethan did. Opening your heart even after devastating loss, risking yourself for strangers, building a life that was messy and complicated and full of the terrifying vulnerability that came from loving people who could be taken away. I think I'm starting to understand that, Kate said quietly. What it means to be alive instead of just safe. It's terrifying. It is, Ethan agreed, but it's also the only thing that makes life worth living. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Mia play in the yard below, listening to the sounds of a neighborhood waking up to Saturday morning. Kate tried to remember the last time she'd just sat somewhere without her phone or laptop, without checking emails or reviewing documents. She couldn't. This simple act of being present, of existing in a moment without trying to optimize or control it, was as foreign as speaking a language she'd never studied. But she was learning, slowly, awkwardly, with all the grace of someone who'd forgotten how to do something simple. She was learning to just be. Margaret's bed and breakfast turned out to be a Victorian house painted cheerful yellow with white trim, complete with a wraparound porch and rocking chairs that looked like they'd witnessed 1,000 sunsets. Margaret herself was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, who took one look at Kate's bandaged hands and immediately ushered her inside with maternal efficiency. Ethan called ahead, Margaret said, leading Kate up a flight of stairs to a room on the second floor. Said you'd been through quite an ordeal and needed somewhere peaceful to recover. This is my nicest room. Windows face east for morning sun, and the bathroom has a tub deep enough for a proper soak. You look like you could use about 3 days of sleep and good meals. The room was exactly what Kate hadn't known she needed. A bed with an actual quilt, handmade by the look of it, not the sterile hotel bedding she was used to. A window seat with cushions perfect for reading or thinking or staring out at the mountains, fresh flowers on the dresser, and the kind of thoughtful touches that suggested someone actually cared about guest comfort rather than just running a business. It's perfect, Kate said, meaning it. Thank you. Breakfast is served from 7 to 9, dinner at 6 if you want it. Though no pressure if you'd rather eat in town, Margaret said, setting Kate's small bag, borrowed from Ethan and containing the few items she'd salvaged from her car, on the luggage rack. There's a cafe 2 blocks down that makes excellent sandwiches, and the library is just past that if you're a reader. Otherwise, the best thing you can do in this town is nothing at all. We're good at nothing here. Kate felt something in her chest ease at those words. Permission to do nothing, to just exist without productivity or achievement or forward momentum. When was the last time she'd given herself that permission? Had she ever? After Margaret left, Kate explored the room more thoroughly, opening drawers and closets like a child investigating a new space. Someone, probably Margaret, had left a basket of toiletries on the bathroom counter, including some salve that claimed to help with burn healing. Kate carefully removed her bandages, grimacing at the sight of her palms, and applied the salve before rewrapping them with fresh gauze from the first aid kit Margaret had thoughtfully provided. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, and Kate saw Rebecca's name on the screen. She'd been avoiding this conversation, knowing Rebecca would have approximately 8,000 questions about how a blind date had resulted in mountain rescues and extended stays in small towns. But avoiding wouldn't make the conversation go away, so Kate answered. "Please tell me you're alive," Rebecca said without preamble. "Because I've been getting increasingly alarming text updates from Ethan's neighbor, who apparently has me in her phone as that friend who set up the disaster date. And the most recent message said something about a ravine and an unconscious man, and I'm this close to driving up there myself to verify you haven't been murdered by a serial killer posing as a carpenter." Despite everything, Kate laughed. "I'm alive. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. And Ethan's not a serial killer. He's possibly the best person I've ever met." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Okay, who are you and what have you done with my best friend? Because the Kate I know doesn't gush about men she met 24 hours ago. The Kate you know spent 24 hours pulling people from fires and climbing mountains and having her entire worldview dismantled by a 7-year-old with dinosaur obsession," Kate replied. "This might be a different Kate. I'm still figuring it out." "Tell me everything," Rebecca demanded. "And I mean everything. From the dinner to right now. Don't leave anything out." So Kate told her. About the disastrous dinner and the diner fire, about the storm and the stranded boy and the descent into the ravine, about pulling James Morrison up that cliff with bleeding hands, about Tyler's reunion with his father, about Mia's wisdom and Ethan's steady presence through all of it. She told Rebecca about missing the investor meeting and discovering that the world didn't end when she relinquished control, about choosing to stay in this small town instead of rushing back to her carefully constructed life. By the end, Rebecca was crying. "Kate, oh my God, Kate, do you know how long I've been waiting for you to let yourself be human again? Since Marcus, you've been this untouchable force of nature, and I've watched you succeed at everything except actually living. And now you're telling me you climbed a mountain with a carpenter and pulled a stranger from a ravine and stayed for pancakes with his daughter, and I just—" Her voice cracked. "I'm so proud of you, and so scared that you're going to get back to the city and convince yourself this was temporary insanity." "I'm scared of that too," Kate admitted. "It's easier to believe this is just some weird trauma response, that when I get back to normal life, I'll revert to who I was before. But Rebecca, I don't want to be who I was before. That person was successful and safe and completely alone. I want to be someone who builds things that matter and lets people in and isn't afraid to climb mountains when someone needs help." "Then be that person," Rebecca said simply. "Kate, you're the most determined human I've ever met. You built a $300 million company from a dorm room. If you decide you want to be different, you'll be different. You just have to want it more than you want the safety of your walls." "I think I do," Kate said softly. "I think yesterday showed me what I've been missing, what I've been sacrificing for the illusion of control, and I don't want to sacrifice it anymore." "Good. Then don't." Rebecca paused, then added with forced casualness. "So this Ethan, are we talking about just a friend who helped you through a crisis, or are we talking about something more?" Kate thought about Ethan's smile, about the way he looked at her like she was someone worth knowing despite all her flaws, about how safe she felt in his presence even when everything was chaotic and dangerous. "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out, if he's interested," which is terrifying to even say out loud because what if— "Stop," Rebecca interrupted. "What if nothing? Kate, from everything you've told me, this man ran into a burning building, drove through a mountain storm, descended into a ravine in the rain, and made you pancakes while his daughter showed you Lego dinosaurs. He's interested. The question is whether you're brave enough to let yourself be interested back." "I'm trying to be," Kate said. "It's harder than climbing the actual mountain. I know, but you're doing it anyway, which is what bravery looks like. Rebecca's voice softened. Take your time up there. Rest, heal, figure out what you want. Your company will survive, I promise. And when you come back, if you come back, make sure it's because you want to, not because you think you should. After hanging up with Rebecca, Kate spent the afternoon doing absolutely nothing productive. She sat in the window seat and watched the street below. She took a long bath in Margaret's deep tub and let herself actually relax instead of using bath time to plan the next day's meetings. She even attempted a short nap, which turned into 3 hours of the deepest sleep she'd had in years. When she woke, the afternoon sun was slanting through the windows in golden shafts, and her phone showed several messages. One from Michael confirming that everything at the office was running smoothly and she should take all the time she needed. One from the hospital saying James Morrison was awake and requesting visitors. And one from Ethan. Mia's demanding we bring you to dinner at our house tonight. She has important questions about your business that apparently can't wait. No pressure if you need alone time, but we'd love to see you. Also, I make a mean lasagna. Kate smiled at the message, at the casual invitation that suggested she was already being woven into their routine rather than being treated as a temporary guest. She typed back, I'd love to come to dinner. What time? And tell Mia I'm prepared for her business interrogation. Ethan's response was immediate. 6 o'clock. Bring your appetite and your patience. When Mia gets curious about something, she doesn't quit until she understands it completely. Fair warning, you might end up explaining software development using dinosaur metaphors. Challenge accepted, Kate replied, and found herself looking forward to the evening with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Not the nervous energy of preparing for a pitch or the adrenaline of closing a deal, but genuine excitement about spending time with people who made her feel seen and valued for who she was, rather than what she'd accomplished. The visit to the hospital came first, though, and Kate met Ethan and Mia in the parking lot at 4:30. Mia was clutching the Lego Stegosaurus she'd made for Tyler with the same fierce protectiveness that suggested she understood how important gifts could be when someone was hurting. They made their way to James Morrison's room on the 3rd floor, and Kate felt her heartbeat quicken as they approached. What did you say to someone whose life you'd saved? Was there a protocol for this? Tyler was sitting in a chair beside his father's bed, and his face transformed with recognition when he saw them enter. You came! You really came! Daddy, these are the people I told you about. They saved you! James Morrison looked remarkably better than he had lying unconscious at the bottom of a ravine. Still pale and clearly in pain, with an impressive array of monitors and IV lines, but his eyes were clear and alert. When he saw Kate and Ethan, those eyes filled with tears. His voice was rough, emotional. I don't know how to thank you. The doctors said if you hadn't found me when you did, if you hadn't gotten me to treatment so fast, I probably wouldn't have made it. You saved my life, both of you, and Tyler, God, I thought I'd never see him again. You don't need to thank us, Ethan said, moving to the bedside with the ease of someone comfortable in hospitals. We're just glad we found you in time. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck and then fell down a mountain, James said with a weak smile. But alive, which is more than I thought I'd be yesterday afternoon. Tyler said you climbed down into a ravine in a storm and pulled me up a cliff? We had help from gravity and stubbornness, Kate said, trying to downplay the heroics even as Tyler launched into an enthusiastic retelling of the rescue from his perspective. The boy made it sound much more dramatic than Kate remembered, with additional details about how brave everyone was and how his daddy was going to be okay, and how he'd been so scared but the nice lady had held him and promised everything would work out. This is for Tyler, Mia interrupted once Tyler's story wound down, presenting the Lego Stegosaurus with formal ceremony. I made it because Stegosaurus means roofed lizard, and your daddy is going to get better so you can go home. It's symbolic. Tyler accepted the dinosaur with reverence, examining it from all angles. It's so cool. I love dinosaurs too. Do you know about the Parasaurolophus? It's my favorite because it had that weird crest on its head that might have been for making sounds. And just like that, the two 7-year-olds were deep in conversation about dinosaur facts, leaving the adults to their own discussion. James wanted to know every detail of the rescue, how they'd found him, how they'd managed the extraction. Kate let Ethan do most of the talking, adding only occasional details about the rope work and the climb back up to the road. I can't believe you did all that with no training, James said, looking at Kate with something like awe. Ethan, sure, he's got the firefighter background. But what did Tyler say? A CEO? And you just decided to climb down a ravine in a storm? Someone had to, Kate said simply. Your son was terrified. You needed help. It wasn't really a decision so much as the only option that made sense in the moment. That's called courage, James said quietly. Doing what needs to be done even when you're scared. My wife, Tyler's mom, she died 2 years ago. Cancer. And ever since then, I've been so careful, so determined not to take any risks that might leave Tyler an orphan. Which is ironic, considering I almost died in a car crash anyway. Life's funny like that. Life's something, Kate agreed. But Tyler still has you, and that's what matters. He's a remarkable kid, by the way. So brave and smart and articulate for 7. He's my whole world, James said, his eyes finding his son across the room where he and Mia were constructing something elaborate from medical tape and tongue depressors. Which is why I can never repay what you did. You gave me more time with him. However many years I get, 20, 30, 40, if I'm lucky. That's all because of you two. So, thank you. Inadequate as that word is, thank you. Kate felt emotion well up in her throat, that dangerous vulnerability that came from recognizing how much her actions mattered. This wasn't a business deal or a strategic victory. This was real. 2 lives changed, a family kept intact, a child who wouldn't grow up without his father. And she'd been part of making that happen. You're welcome, she managed. Just promise me you'll stick around for him. All those years you mentioned, make them count. I will, James promised. Every single one. Dinner at Ethan's house that night was exactly the chaos Mia had promised. The little girl had indeed prepared business questions, which ranged from surprisingly insightful to completely absurd. She wanted to know how Kate decided what products to build, which led to a discussion about market research that somehow involved dinosaur migration patterns. She asked about managing employees, which became a conversation about leadership that used the pack behavior of velociraptors as a framework. And she asked how Kate knew when to take risks, which was a question Kate was still figuring out the answer to for herself. I think, Kate said carefully, helping Mia set the table while Ethan put finishing touches on the lasagna, that the best risks are the ones where you might lose something, but you'll definitely gain something important, like learning or growth or connection with people. The worst risks are when you might lose a lot and not gain anything meaningful. Like climbing down a mountain in a storm, Mia said. You might have gotten hurt, but you gained saving someone's life. That's a good risk. Exactly like that. And what about liking my daddy? Mia asked with the bluntness that was her trademark. Is that a good risk or a bad risk? Kate glanced at Ethan, who had frozen at the stove with a serving spoon in midair, his expression caught between horror at his daughter's directness and curiosity about Kate's answer. I think, Kate said slowly, that liking your daddy is one of the best risks I've considered in a very long time. Because even if it's scary, even if I might get hurt, the possibility of building something real with someone who's kind and brave and makes excellent pancakes, that's worth the risk. Good answer, Mia said with satisfaction. Daddy thinks so too. I can tell because his ears get red when he's happy, and they're super red right now. Ethan's ears were indeed red, and he shot his daughter a look that promised later discussions about appropriate dinner conversation topics. But he was smiling too, and when his eyes met Kate's across the kitchen, she saw hope and warmth and the kind of careful possibility that came from 2 wounded people considering whether they might risk being whole together. The lasagna was as good as advertised, and the conversation flowed easily between bites, sometimes about dinosaurs, sometimes about Kate's company, sometimes about Ethan's carpentry projects. Mia told elaborate stories about school and her friends, and the teacher who didn't believe that Spinosaurus probably spent most of its time in water. Ethan shared anecdotes about his fire department days, and some of the more interesting custom furniture requests he'd received. And Kate found herself talking about her early days building the company, about the fear and excitement and occasional terror of starting something from nothing. It sounds like you built your business the way Daddy builds furniture, Mia observed. Carefully, one piece at a time, making sure everything fits together right. I suppose I did, Kate agreed, though I haven't always been as careful about the fit between work and the rest of my life. That's something I'm trying to improve. After dinner, while Ethan did dishes and Mia was supposedly getting ready for bed, though judging by the construction sounds coming from upstairs, she was actually building something with Legos. Kate found herself alone in the living room again, studying the family photos. She paused on one in particular, Sarah, Ethan, and baby Mia at what looked like a beach, all three of them sandy and sun-soaked and radiating joy. "That was our last vacation before she died," Ethan said quietly, appearing beside Kate with 2 mugs of tea. "Mia was 2.5. Sarah was already sick, but we didn't know it yet. I look at that photo and see how happy we were, completely unaware that everything was about to change." "Do you regret it?" Kate asked. "Not knowing? Or would you have preferred to know what was coming?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I don't know. Knowing might have let us prepare, say proper goodbyes, make different choices, but it also would have stolen the joy from those last few months. We would have been grieving while she was still alive instead of just living. So maybe not knowing was a gift, in its own way." "That's a remarkably healthy perspective for someone who's been through what you've been through." "Therapy helps," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Lots and lots of therapy. And time. And Mia, who needed me to be functional even when I wanted to fall apart. You'd be surprised what you can survive when someone's depending on you." Kate thought about her own company, about the 300 employees who depended on her leadership, and realized she'd been using that responsibility as armor rather than motivation, hiding behind duty instead of letting it push her toward growth. "Can I ask you something? When did you know you were ready to try dating again? Was there a moment or was it gradual?" "Both," Ethan said. "Gradual in that I slowly realized I was lonely, that I wanted adult conversation and connection beyond parenting and work. But also a moment, about 6 months ago, when I was reading Mia a bedtime story about a knight who had to be brave even when he was scared. And I thought, what kind of example am I setting if I'm teaching her to be brave, but I'm too scared to risk my own heart again? So I told Rebecca's husband I'd be open to being set up if he knew anyone interesting. Enter you." "Enter me," Kate echoed. "The disaster-blind date that turned into a mountain rescue, and apparently an extended stay in a small town where I'm learning to do nothing. How's that going, by the way? The doing nothing?" "It's harder than building a company," Kate admitted. "Every instinct tells me I should be working, achieving, moving forward. Sitting still feels like failure, but I'm trying to retrain my brain to understand that rest isn't laziness and reflection isn't wasted time." "It's definitely not wasted time," Ethan assured her, "especially not if you're using it to figure out what you actually want your life to look like, instead of just defaulting to what you think it should look like." Kate sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her hands, carefully, because they still hurt despite the healing. "I think I want it to look more like this," she said quietly. "More dinners with people who matter. More conversations that aren't about business strategy. More time for things like helping 7-year-olds understand software development through dinosaur metaphors. I'm just not sure how to build that while also running a company." "The same way you build anything else," Ethan said. "One decision at a time. You choose to delegate more. You choose to trust your team. You choose to set boundaries around your work hours. You choose to say yes to dinner invitations, even when you have emails to answer. It's not a single grand gesture. It's 1,000 small choices that add up to a different kind of life." "That sounds exhausting." "Living any way that matters is exhausting," Ethan pointed out. "The question is whether you want to be exhausted building walls or exhausted building connections. At least with connections, you get lasagna and Lego dinosaurs and people who care whether you're okay." Kate set down her tea mug and turned to face Ethan fully, her heart hammering with the kind of fear that had nothing to do with mountains or fires. "Can I be honest about something?" "Always. I'm terrified of whatever this is between us. Terrified that I'll screw it up or that you'll realize I'm actually kind of a mess under all the CEO polish. Terrified that I'll let myself care about you and Mia, and then something will happen, and I'll lose you both. And I know that's not rational. I know my fear of loss is based on one bad experience with Marcus. But knowing that doesn't make the fear go away." Ethan reached out slowly, giving Kate time to pull back if she wanted, and took her hand, the one that wasn't bandaged, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Can I be honest too? I'm terrified as well. Terrified that you'll go back to the city and realize this was just a weird interlude, that your real life doesn't have space for a small-town carpenter and his inquisitive daughter. Terrified that I'll let myself fall for you, more than I already have, and you'll choose your company over anything we might build together. So we're both scared. The question is whether we let that fear make our decisions, or whether we're brave enough to try anyway. More than you already have? Kate's voice came out whisper soft. Ethan's smile was rueful and honest. I started falling for you when you apologized after the diner fire. Most people would have just walked away, but you came back, you acknowledged your mistakes, you showed me there was substance under the defense mechanisms. Then you rappelled down a mountain in a storm and pulled a man from a ravine with bleeding hands and refused to quit even when you were terrified. How could I not fall for that? You're extraordinary, Kate Blackwell. You just needed a crisis to remember it. Kate felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears this time, not the complicated grief-joy mixture from earlier. I think I'm falling for you too, for your kindness and your courage, and the way you teach Mia that thoughtfulness is a superpower, for how you show up for people without expectation of reward, for pancakes and treehouse building, and the way you look at me like I'm someone worth knowing despite all my flaws. You're worth knowing because of your flaws, not despite them, Ethan corrected gently. Those flaws are what make you real, what make you human. I don't want the polished CEO who has everything figured out. I want the woman who climbed a mountain with me, who admits when she's scared, who's brave enough to try being vulnerable even when every instinct tells her to run. I don't want to run, Kate said, and meant it. Not from this, not from you. I want to stay and see what we might build together. I want to have more dinners and conversations and moments where Mia asks impossible questions. I want to learn how to be the kind of person who can run a company and also have a life. And I want... She stopped, gathering courage. I want to kiss you, if that's okay. Ethan's answer was to close the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that made Kate's heart ache. The kiss was soft and questioning at first, a careful exploration. But then Kate leaned in and Ethan pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like promise and possibility, and the terrifying beauty of two people choosing to risk their hearts despite every good reason to stay protected. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Kate rested her forehead against Ethan's and smiled. So this is what choosing alive feels like. This is what it feels like, Ethan confirmed. Scary and wonderful, and absolutely worth it. Daddy's kissing Kate! Mia's delighted shriek came from the stairs, where she was apparently supposed to be sleeping but was instead spying on the adults with gleeful enthusiasm. Does this mean she's your girlfriend now? Can she come to my school presentation next week? I'm doing mine on Pachycephalosaurus and I want to show her. Ethan groaned and pressed his face against Kate's shoulder. I'm sorry. I promise I did tell her to go to bed. She has selective hearing when she's curious about something. It's fine, Kate said, laughing. Mia, I would love to come to your presentation if I'm still here next week. And yes, I think your daddy and I are going to try the whole girlfriend-boyfriend thing. Is that okay with you? It's very okay, Mia said seriously. You're nice and you're smart and you know about software and you helped save Tyler's daddy and you don't treat me like I'm just a kid. Those are all important qualities in a potential stepmom. Whoa, slow down there, Ethan said quickly. We're starting with girlfriend, not jumping straight to stepmom. Kate and I need time to figure out what this is before we make any big declarations. But you like her a lot and she likes you a lot, and you just kissed her in front of the family photos, which means it's serious, Mia pointed out with flawless 7-year-old logic. I'm just being practical about possibilities. Bed, Ethan said firmly. Now. We'll discuss your interpretation of relationship timelines tomorrow. Fine, Mia sighed dramatically. But for the record, I approve. And Kate? Yes? Thank you for choosing to be alive. Daddy's been waiting for someone brave enough to do that with him. And with that pronouncement, she disappeared back up the stairs, leaving 2 stunned adults staring after her. Your daughter is going to rule the world someday, Kate said finally. I know, Ethan replied. I'm terrified and proud in equal measure. But she's right about one thing. I have been waiting for someone brave enough to choose being alive. Someone willing to risk the mess and the fear and the possibility of loss because the alternative is missing out on all the good parts. Thank you for being that person. Thank you for showing me what the good parts look like, Kate replied. I forgot somewhere along the way, or maybe I never really knew, but I want to learn. With you, if you'll let me. I'll let you, Ethan promised, on one condition. What's that? Don't give up your company or change who you are trying to fit into my life. I fell for Kate Blackwell, the CEO, who builds empires, not despite that part of you, but including it. Whatever we build together needs to have space for your ambition and your work and your drive to succeed. I don't want you to diminish yourself trying to fit into some idea of what a relationship should look like. Kate felt something tight in her chest finally loosen, some fear she hadn't even fully acknowledged. You're sure? Because my life is demanding and complicated, and sometimes I'll have to choose work over personal time. I can be better about balance, but I can't stop being who I am. I don't want you to stop being who you are, Ethan said firmly. I want you to be exactly who you are, just with the addition of space for this. He gestured between them. Whatever this becomes. We'll figure it out as we go. You'll have weeks where work demands everything, and I'll have weeks where Mia and the carpentry business and treehouse building take priority. That's okay. That's normal. We just promise to show up for each other when it matters and communicate when we need more or can give less. That sounds remarkably healthy and well-adjusted, Kate observed. Therapy, Ethan reminded her with a smile. So much therapy, plus trial and error. I won't pretend I have all the answers, Kate. I'm figuring this out just as much as you are. But I think we can figure it out together if we're both willing to try. I'm willing, Kate said. Scared, but willing. That's all anyone can ask for. The next week passed in a strange, wonderful suspension of Kate's normal life. She stayed at Margaret's bed and breakfast, venturing out for walks through the town and meals at the local cafe, and long conversations with Ethan that ranged from profound to playful. She attended Mia's school presentation on Pachycephalosaurus and was thoroughly impressed by the level of research the 7-year-old had conducted. She visited James and Tyler at the hospital twice more, watching as the man's recovery progressed, and the boy's fear eased into relief. And slowly, carefully, she began making decisions about what her life would look like going forward. She called a company-wide meeting via video conference. Her bandaged hands made typing impossible, but she'd gotten proficient with voice-to-text software and announced significant changes. She was promoting Michael to COO, giving him operational control of day-to-day decisions. She was establishing clearer boundaries around her own time, delegating more responsibility to department heads, and implementing a policy that discouraged after-hours email unless there was a genuine emergency. She was, in essence, building the kind of company that could function without her constant presence, which meant she'd built something real and sustainable rather than just an extension of her own control issues. The response from her team was overwhelmingly positive, which told Kate something important about how badly her management style had needed adjustment. People wanted to be trusted. They wanted responsibility and authority to make decisions. They'd been waiting for her to step back and let them prove their capabilities, and she'd been too scared of losing control to give them that chance. So what happens now? Ethan asked one evening as they sat on his porch swing, Mia playing in the yard with the hose and some unfortunate action figures who were apparently experiencing a dinosaur tsunami. Do you go back to the city, set up some kind of long-distance relationship until we figure out if this is sustainable? Kate had been thinking about that question for days, weighing options and possibilities with the same analytical precision she'd once applied exclusively to business decisions. Actually, I had a different thought. What if I didn't go back? Not permanently, I mean. I still need to be in the city regularly for meetings and strategy sessions. But what if I moved my home base here, got a place in town, split my time between here and the city, built a life that includes both my company and this? She gestured to the house, the yard, the small town spreading out around them. All of this. Ethan turned to look at her fully, surprise and hope warring on his face. You'd do that? Give up your penthouse and your corner office proximity to move to a town where the most exciting entertainment is arguing about proper spaghetti sauce technique. The penthouse was never home, Kate said honestly. It was just a place I kept my stuff between work sessions. And I don't need to be physically in the office every day now that I'm delegating more. Technology exists. I can video conference. I can be in the city 2 or 3 days a week and here the rest of the time. Best of both worlds. I keep my company, but I also get a life. And you're sure? Ethan pressed. Because Kate, I don't want you making this decision just because we're in the honeymoon phase of whatever this is. In 6 months, when the novelty wears off and you're frustrated by small-town life and missing the energy of the city, I don't want you resenting this choice. I'm not deciding based on novelty, Kate said firmly. I'm deciding based on what I learned on that mountain. Life is short and unpredictable. James Morrison almost died trying to find help for his son. Tyler almost lost his father. Sarah never got to see Mia grow up. Marcus taught me that people can betray you, but these last 2 weeks have taught me that people can also save you, literally and figuratively. I'm not giving up my company or my ambition. I'm just redefining what success looks like. And for me right now, success includes pancakes with Mia and carpentry lessons and dinners where we debate dinosaur facts. It includes this. Ethan's smile was slow and warm and full of promise. Okay then. Welcome to town, Kate Blackwell. Fair warning, Margaret will absolutely try to recruit you for the annual charity bake sale. Mrs. Chen will ask invasive questions about our relationship status at every opportunity, and Mia will expect you to attend every school event from now until she graduates high school. I think I can handle that, Kate said, leaning into Ethan's shoulder. I pulled a man from a ravine. I can survive small-town social obligations. That's the spirit, Ethan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Oh, and one more thing. Yes? I love you. The words were simple, honest, offered without expectation or demand. I probably shouldn't say it this soon, and you definitely don't have to say it back, but I want you to know. You're remarkable and brave, and you're teaching me that it's okay to risk my heart again. So I love you. Just thought you should know. Kate felt tears well up, happy tears that she was learning to accept instead of suppress. I love you too, she said, and meant it with every part of her carefully reconstructed heart. I love your kindness and your courage and the way you parent Mia. I love how you see people, really see them, and show up when they need help. I love that you've helped me remember how to be alive instead of just successful. And I love, she paused, smiling through her tears. I love that you make really excellent pancakes. Ethan laughed, pulling her closer. Well, good pancakes are essential to any lasting relationship. 3 months later, Kate stood in her new home office, a converted bedroom in the house she'd purchased 2 streets over from Ethan's, and surveyed her kingdom with satisfaction. One wall held monitors showing real-time data from Blackwell Industries. Another wall displayed Mia's latest artwork, increasingly sophisticated Lego sculptures and drawings that showed genuine artistic talent. The desk held her laptop, several dinosaur reference books that Mia had declared essential to a proper workspace, and a small red Lego heart that the little girl had made as a housewarming present. Your most prized possession, Mia had said when presenting it, echoing words she'd overheard Kate say weeks ago. Because it means you're part of our family now. Kate had cried, something she was doing a lot more of lately, and somehow that felt like progress rather than weakness. The video conference with her leadership team started in 5 minutes, but Kate took a moment to look out the window at the mountains in the distance. Somewhere up there was the place where her life had changed, where she'd discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Where she'd learned that the strongest walls were the ones you built around the people you loved, not the ones you built around your heart. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Dinner at 6? Mia wants to show you her latest treehouse edition. Also, I miss you, and it's been a whole 4 hours since I saw you, which is clearly too long. Kate smiled and typed back with thumbs that still bore faint scars from rope burns. 6 is perfect. I miss you too. See you soon. She turned back to her monitors as her team began logging into the conference call, ready to discuss Q4's strategy and market expansion. But this time, the work felt different. Not like an escape or a defense mechanism, but like one piece of a full life. Important, but not all-consuming. She was still Kate Blackwell, still the CEO who built empires. But now she was also the woman who attended 7-year-old school presentations, who helped build purple treehouses on weekends, who'd learned that sometimes the biggest risk was allowing yourself to need people. Michael's face appeared on the main screen, and the meeting began with its usual agenda items. But halfway through, Kate found herself doing something she never would have done 3 months ago. She interrupted the discussion to say, "This is all excellent work, everyone. I'm proud of what we're building. But I need to leave exactly at 5:30 today because I have dinner with my boyfriend and his daughter. And that matters more than an extra 30 minutes of strategy discussion. We'll table the remaining items for next week. Sound good?" The looks of shock on her team's faces were almost comical, but they were accompanied by smiles and nods. "Sounds great," Michael said. "Honestly, boss, it's good to see you having a life outside work. Makes you more human, in the best way." "I'm learning," Kate replied. "Slowly but surely, I'm learning." That evening, as promised, she showed up at Ethan's house at 6 o'clock sharp. Mia immediately dragged her to the backyard to show off the rope ladder that had finally been installed in the treehouse. Safely, with multiple redundant attachment points and testing that satisfied even Ethan's cautious standards. Tyler Morrison was there too, his father now fully recovered and committed to maintaining the friendship between the two families who'd been brought together by crisis. They ate dinner at the picnic table in the yard, grilled chicken and vegetables that Ethan had prepared with Mia's enthusiastic, if not entirely helpful, assistance. They talked about Tyler's upcoming birthday party and James's return to work, and Mia's lobbying campaign for a pet dinosaur, which had been gently redirected toward maybe getting a bearded dragon instead. As the sun set behind the mountains and the children played in the treehouse with the kind of shrieking joy only 7-year-olds could produce, Kate leaned against Ethan's shoulder and felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years. Not just contentment or satisfaction or the absence of pain, actual happiness. The real kind, built on genuine connection and chosen vulnerability and the daily decision to show up for people who mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. "About how none of this was in my life plan 3 months ago," Kate replied honestly. "About how I thought success looked like corner offices and IPOs and never depending on anyone. About how wrong I was." "Any regrets?" Kate thought about the investor meeting she'd missed, about the $30 million that had come through anyway, about the company that had proven it could function without her micromanagement. She thought about the mountain and the ravine and the moment she'd almost fallen, and Ethan had caught her without hesitation. She thought about Mia's wisdom and Tyler's resilience and James's second chance at life. She pulled the small red Lego heart from her pocket. She'd taken to carrying it everywhere, a reminder of what mattered, and held it up to catch the last rays of sunlight. "Only that it took a fire and a storm to find what I was missing," she said, repeating words from months ago that felt like they belonged to a different person entirely. "But I'm here now. We're here now, and that's enough." "More than enough," Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That's everything." And as the mountain sky darkened to purple, and the first stars appeared and the sound of children's laughter filled the air, Kate Blackwell, CEO, mountain climber, girlfriend, chosen family member, and someone who was finally learning what it meant to be alive, had to agree. This was everything. Not perfect, not without challenge, but real and messy and beautiful in all the ways that actually mattered. She'd spent 8 years building an empire to prove she didn't need anyone. But here, surrounded by the people who'd shown up when it mattered, who'd stayed through the storm, she'd discovered something more valuable than any quarterly earnings report or market valuation. She'd discovered home. Not a place, but a collection of people who saw her completely, flaws and strengths, past wounds and present courage, and chose to love her anyway. And that, Kate thought, as Mia's voice called down from the treehouse, demanding that all the adults come up to see the sunset from the best viewing platform in town, that was worth more than all the corner offices in the world.